Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games. Oh, and yes, we do. You, my friend, are listening to part 2. Welcome to the jungle, my ayahuasca journey at Rythmia. Make sure, of course, to go back and listen to part 1 if you're just tuning into this one, because you will need the context. This is a narration, a field report of a week-long journey I took from Los Angeles to Costa Rica to the depths of my soul and back. What you're going to hear in part 2 are 2 more interviews. You're also going to hear reports on my 3rd and 4th ceremony. And then this episode will conclude with the details of an accident that took place on my last day, followed by perhaps the most profound realization of this whole experience for me. And that was discovering the initial trauma that took place the moment I was born. At this point, I'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, open your heart, and open your mind as we dive into the rest of this journey with an interview featuring Christian Minson on how breathwork can coincide with plant medicines, and then an interview with Dr. Jeff Mcnary, who's a psychiatrist that's worked in recovery for 25 years. He's going to talk about the science of this medicine. So this is going to bring you through the end of the journey along with 2 fantastic interviews right in the middle. Enjoy the show. Take a moment to bring you up to speed in this story. So this interview with Christian Minson took place very early in the morning after the night of my 2nd ceremony. So this would be the 3rd day. And later this day, after the interview with Christian and then Jeff McNairy, was my 3rd ceremony. So I've just had my mind blown, my heart completely blown open, and I'm here trying to set up my audio equipment, my video equipment. And to be honest, at times it was a little tough to sort of work, if you could call what I do work, because it's so fun. I don't really consider it work, but there are technical things that you have to go through. And we recorded this out by the pool. There's also a video of this on YouTube, by the way, like many of the other interviews I do. And so I'm scrambling around. It's 9:30 in the morning or something ridiculous like that, as I recall, and just trying to get my head together and prep for the conversation here with Christian. And we ended up having a really lighthearted, fun time. He has a fascinating story. And so I'm really glad I was able to include what he does here, because breath work has been a huge portal into my own awakening. I've been doing various forms of breath work, as you'll hear in this conversation, for many years. And what transpired later in the journey, which you'll hear about later in this episode, was actually doing some breath work after all the ayahuasca ceremonies had ended. So at this stage of the game, we're going to go ahead and jump into this conversation, and then you'll get some more field reports after that, and we'll jump right into the next interview with Dr. Jeff Mcnary, where we really get into the science of plant medicines. So what we talk about with Christian, who, by the way, is the resident director of the Breathwork Program at Rythmia, and how he spent 10 years as a monk meditating and serving in search of a deeper meaning in life. He now helps others achieve greater spiritual and emotional intelligence by integrating trauma, releasing limiting habits, managing emotions, and teaching others to find meaning in their own lives and work. And that definitely happened in this interview. Here's what we talk about: what breathwork is and how it can help you in ways that yoga can't, why Christian became a monk in the first place, and what made him transition back into being a worldly person, how the healers at Rythmia help visitors find the light warrior essence within themselves, what separates transformational breathwork from the hundreds of other breathwork practices out there, rebirthing through breath, the benefits of integrating a natural habitat into your spiritual experiences, and finally, how breathwork works with plant medicine to evolve your experience and help you claim it as your own. So sit back, my friends, and enjoy this conversation with Christian Minson. Welcome to the Lifestylist Podcast, Christian.
Thank you, Luke. Great to be here.
Yeah, dude. It's good to kind of sit down with you again. We had a little formal or informal introduction the other morning, and I always like to get to know a guest a bit before we record. Sometimes it's strange just coming in cold. It's also strange to go to sleep at 4 a.m. On ayahuasca and wake up at 8 a.m. to do an interview. So you might have to carry me on this one, bro. You just talk and I'll listen. But I think I'd like to start with, I want to talk about breathwork specifically because I've not really done a show on that, but also how that ties into consciousness and, personal development and growth and spirituality.
Right.
But first, I'd just like to hear how you first, began your journey of self-discovery and evolution.
Wow. Well, you want the long story or the short
one?
Story?
Give me the truncated one because then I want to really go dive a little bit deeper into what's going on currently.
Well, the short story is through high school and college, was on a self-discovery mission, a spiritual quest, and that got me on a spiritual path, which I ended up becoming a monk for 10 years of my life. And
what type of monk?
A yogic monk, monk in a yogic order, the Swami order of India.
Got it, okay.
Though I was a monk in Los Angeles, and that's where our ashram was. And so I did that for 10 years of my life. And as I was, as it came upon that 10-year mark and I was having these thoughts that I needed to leave, which was a little disconcerting because I had dedicated my life to this and wasn't sure what this feeling was of leaving this thing that, that I'd committed to. I discovered breathwork, transformational breathwork, which really helped me to get in touch with in my deeper motivations. It helped me in ways that meditation didn't even help me. In essence, it helped me to get in touch with my feelings. One, that I had feelings. Two, that my feelings were that they could express. And then three, that finally to integrate those feelings. So I basically, long story short, made the transition into becoming a worldly person again, and I got into the field of breathwork as my practice. Now I've been doing that for the last 12 years, which landed me at Rythmia here a year and a few months ago.
That's really interesting that you started it 12 years ago. Now, I want to get into a little bit of the history of the different, modalities of breathwork, but other than in Kundalini Yoga, as I was telling you, which they don't even call it breath work, it's just part of, the various kriyas you have. Some of them involve strange ways of breathing and moving and sound and vibration and all that. But in the formal sense of breath work, I think it was like a couple years ago that I found out about that, with the Wim Hof and then holotropic breath work and stuff. So you're what we'd call an early adopter. I've found breath work personally to be extremely transformative. And as I was telling you the other day, I've not been intoxicated in a really long time. And I've had experiences doing breath work, especially the longer form, not so much like the short little Wim Hof sessions and stuff, but in some of the longer ones where you go for 12 minutes, 20 minutes. I mean, I've had complete healing meltdowns where I'm crying, laughing, seeing colors, having sort of a sober DMT moments,
Yeah.
And so I'm just a huge fan. I'm excited to learn more about it. So when you came out of the period of being a monk in the ashram and then discovered breath work and kind of went back, as you said, out into the secular world, so to speak, what type of breath work did you first start working with? And is that the same method that you use now?
I discovered the method of transformational breath. My teacher was Judith Kravitz, who founded that work over 30 years ago, and she created this work. I discovered it, and then because it had helped me so much. It's that healer helps. The person who is healed becomes the healer and uses the techniques that help them the most. And that was kind of my story. It had made such a profound impact in my experience that I said, I have to share this with people. And it was very much in line with my lifestyle as a monk because it wasn't something that we ingested. It wasn't something external that we brought into us. But as a monk, the main technique was meditation, which interestingly enough was our meditations were these focus on our breathing, to manipulating our breathing in a way to send energy up and down the spine to let go of body consciousness and attain higher states of awareness. So when the breath work was kind of like a way to bring that to the world without having the religious overlay on it. So I could reach a much wider audience. People who would be a little put off by meditation or by religion, so to speak, could understand breath, and that breath could enhance your life, and they'd be much more willing to try it. And then they get surprised, kind of like you were intimating, of how much profound experience can happen just through a breathing process.
Yeah, it's actually crazy, and of course, anytime I sort of report on a different topic on the show, I'm always encouraging people to give it a shot. And what's really cool is people do. I guarantee you, many people will hear this and be like, what's this breathwork thing? And they'll Google their local, yoga center or something like that and probably be able to find it. It's becoming more widespread. So that concept also, I want to just touch on where you talked about, the healer healing thyself and then healing others. It's really funny that you said that, because yesterday, before ceremony, I was kind of doing a little social media report on my experience so far. And something I became aware of something. I sort of unpacked this idea of being a healer. There was a couple of months ago, I was in Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny in Florida, which was just an amazing experience, but super intense, so much different than this, But in terms of a psychological restructuring, it was very useful, because I really found out what my true purpose is, which is a huge gift, definitely worth the however many days I spent there. But I forget my exact mission statement at the moment, but it was like, I'm a healer. And when that came to me, it came to me sort of, I don't know, from God or my subconscious. And I was like, I just bristled at that, because I just got these visions of like, everyone's a fucking healer in LA. You know what I mean? It's like, what does that mean? I do massage, or like, what? I'm a healer. It's like, what does that mean? But it's stuck. And yesterday I had the realization, exactly what you just said, that for so many years I've been healing myself, using these different modalities and spirituality and health and all kinds of stuff. And then I thought, well, how does that apply and make me the healer? And it was exactly what you said. It's that I'm healing myself and then demonstrating for people what I'm doing, what works, what doesn't, and what I'm finding to be restorative and helpful. And then other people can take that information if they want and go apply it to their own life and heal themselves. So I was so grateful to be able to have that realization and get a little more comfortable with what that means to me. And
that's really what is happening here at Rythmia too. We use a little bit different language, like we're helping people to discover the light worker or light warrior essence within them, and basically to help their light shine a bit brighter. And then that means then going out in the world and helping in some sort of way. The monastic life, we really were big on the concept of service. And so service, being a healer, sharing your gifts, all that is sort of part and parcel of the same package.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, because I think there's a certain period of time where and this sounds like maybe your experience, but one goes within and you really start to build your consciousness, raise your consciousness, right? And use meditation and things like that and become aware. But then it starts to go stale if you're not sharing it and giving it away. It becomes sort of this self-obsession spirituality, you know what I mean?
Well, I always think of life as a flow, and my whole company is called Breath Flow. You can find me at breathflow.com. But this whole idea that life is this continuous movement, and that if we're not sharing, it's like the stagnant eddy on the side of the river. It just kind of swirls there, and then it develops moss or mosquitoes, and putrefies, and
right.
You need to keep it moving, and moving is having it and then passing it on, having it and passing it on.
That's a great metaphor. I didn't know it was called an eddy. I've heard the word, but I didn't know what it was. I can totally picture that, because I spend a lot of time on rivers. That's really cool. So in terms of the breath work, is that first technique that you used is what you've stuck with this whole time?
Very much so. It, what I usually instruct people when I'm giving my breathwork classes is there's dozens, if not hundreds, of breathwork techniques out there, and many of them are diametrically opposed. Like one will tell you to breathe hard and heavy, and others are telling you to breathe gentle and easeful. One's telling you to hold your breath, others are telling you not. Some are telling you to breathe through the nose, others telling you to breathe through the mouth. People can get very confused as to what's the right way to breathe. And I feel that they're all valid ways, and that you really got to look at what's the end goal of each of these breath techniques. One may be like this fire breath of yoga, it's a very cleansing breath, a heavy exhaling, so you're getting out toxins. Or, yoga has what's called a ujjayi breath, which is a very metered in and out with a aspirated sound, where it gives a very even keel to focus your mind and keep you in balance, which you need when you're all wrapped up like a pretzel and bouncing on one hand,
It's funny that breath is what I do when I'm recording podcasts, when the other person's talking.
Yeah.
As you were doing that, I was like, that's what I'm doing right now.
So it keeps you focused. It keeps you alert.
It keeps me focused and keeps my heart rate down. It's just calming so I can stay present in the moment and not get nervous about where it's going next or get caught up in my head and stay in my heart and in that intuition. So
my point is that the breath that I learned, the transformational breath, really has a wide base of uses. So, and it's a breath about letting go. The real overlying purpose is to let go and let the breath start breathing you. We call this activation. When you're in an activated state, you're putting very little effort or no effort at all into the breathing process, and yet the breath is just humming along, and you're getting all these profound experiences. So it's my belief that if you start by learning how to let go and relax, any kind of breathing technique that requires a little more effort or manipulation of the breath comes easier, and we're not so constrictive rather than gently controlling. And then the other point is that this particular breath has a wide variety of uses. It's an emotionally cathartic breath. It can be a physically energizing breath. It can be a spiritually connecting breath. So if you were to learn one technique and then stop your exploration of breath work altogether, which I don't recommend, but if you were to do that, I would recommend starting with this technique, because that it will take you a long way.
It's multifaceted. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I just realized as you were talking, I actually went and did breath work this morning. I usually do it when I sun gaze every morning. Today I couldn't wake up at 5 or whatever time the sun rises here. It's out of control early. But it's almost like I have a difficult time going a day without doing breath work now, having incorporated. But I like what you said about, relaxing into it, because I find it very difficult still, even after a few years of working with various modalities of breath work. I find it really difficult to get started. It's like driving to the gym for me. I'm just like, oh God, I fucking hate this. And my gym is my brother's gym. I have a key and it's like a mile from my house. I'm just like, I can't do this. Once I get in there and like move around a little bit, I get pumped and I'm into it. And that's how the breath work is. It's like the first few rounds, I'm like, God, this sucks. I can't do this. And then that, as you said, that sort of automation kicks in and you're going, wow, I'm being breathed and I'm not breathing. It's a cool experience to have. Yeah. I was listening to an interview with Stan Grof, the creator of holotropic breath work, right? And I see if you know about any of the history of it, because I just have a few sentences from what he said. But he was talking about how he was working with LSD in the 60s, and then doing research, not like partying and going to Woodstock, and then became outlawed and demonized. And so he had to find a way to help people achieve that state naturally. And that's what eventually led him to breath work. Do you know anything about the history of your lineage or other forms in general? Like who some of the key players were and how it came about?
Sure. The best I've been able to piece together, a few key players. I'd say the top 3 players are Stanislav Grof, who developed holotropic, Leonard Orr, who developed rebirthing, and then Judith Kravitz, who developed this transformational breath. And if I really go back, I was fortunate enough to get to meet Leonard Orr and take a workshop with him one day. And I kind of asked him, because it seemed like he started, from talking with him, he basically indicated that most of all this started with him back in the 1970s. He created this technique called rebirthing, which at first was done in a hot tub. And it was this whole concept that we have trauma at birth that we don't have any control over. I mean, just even trying to squeeze yourself through a little canal, it's like completely claustrophobic, but it's part of a natural process. But the idea is that we catalog a lot of trauma that we carry with us for the rest of our lives unless we do something about it. And they started doing this rebirthing, which was breathing in hot tubs and sort of recreating the birth experience. And at first they thought it was the hot water that was the catalytic element, but soon discovered that it was the breath. Now, breathing in hot water accelerates the whole thing, but the breath is the main element. And then he told me, I asked him about holotropic, and he said, well, I gave Stan Grof his first breath session.
Oh, wow.
So whether that's true or not, it seemed like, and I do know that Judith Kravitz learned about breath work through somebody who was a rebirthing practitioner, and then she took that and developed, a more unique style, that differentiated it from rebirthing. But so to me, tracing it all back, it goes back to Leonard Orr and rebirthing around the 1970s that created, the big three, the holotropic, the rebirthing, and the transformational breath. And then since then, dozens of other variations on the theme, whether people just rebrand it or develop little tweaks and stuff. So there's dozens of them out there now. And then figures like Wim Hof have sprung up, who I don't think were directly influenced by these techniques, but sort of developed his own thing. And but it is in this whole modern wave of breath practice and exploration.
Cool. That's really useful information. Thank you. The idea of getting in water and doing breath work does not sound safe.
Well, yeah,
you pass out.
You want to do it with a facilitator,
right,
definitely. You don't want to do it by yourself.
That's a good disclaimer to give people.
Yes,
that's actually, I've done a few Wim Hof trainings, and that's something that he always says, like, don't do it in water, because his whole thing's the ice bath, right? Yeah. And so people think you're supposed to do the fucking breath work in the ice bath. Right. No, you do it before, and then you're kind of immune to the cold, which is interesting too, because it's quite cold in LA, right? I mean, anyone listening that lives in North Dakota or Iceland or whatever, but it's been maybe in the, well, I don't even want to say because people get pissed and don't live there. But say it's like
it's cold. It's cold for
it's
Southern
50
California.
degrees in the morning, and what I do is I get right out of bed. I put my bathrobe on. I go onto my little balcony. I find that sunrise, and I start doing my breath work. But it's quite cold, and you wake up. Your body temperature is usually kind of low, and maybe after one round, I'm completely warm. Mm-hmm. It's just really interesting how you can really regulate your biology by using breath and oxygen.
What you're doing,
bizarre.
Oxygen, drawing back on my spiritual experience, oxygen is the carrier of prana. Prana is a Sanskrit word for life force energy. Yogis kind of know it, but that prana is the essential element of life. It is the intelligent activating agent, and it is energy. So as we start drawing more of that energy into our bodies, its intelligence coupled with our body's intelligence transforms that energy into what it needs. And heat is a form of energy, right? Heat is just transforming that life force into, heat, on the infrared spectrum of the, wavelengths of energy. You might transmute it into emotional energy and have emotional catharsis. So that is just wavelengths of energy. So we're working with the life force itself and in its intelligence. If we can just bring it in here and let it have its way, it does what's necessary. And on a cold day, what's necessary is to warm up a bit.
Right.
And I do want to make a disclaimer too. When we're talking about the water breathing, that was body temperature water, not the freezing cold water that Wim Hof does.
Right.
So,
I think the cold water, there's such a shock to your system that probably makes it a little more risky than, sitting in a hot tub and doing it. So definitely something to be said for that. So the interesting thing is we were discussing at breakfast the other day is that this interview here at Rythmia during this week that I'm here is taking place before I have the opportunity to experience there's 3 breathwork sessions or 2?
Yeah, there's 3 days of breathwork.
Okay.
People usually are able to make 2 because they're usually flying on one of the days.
Okay.
At Rythmia, it's a unique process. The plant medicine is really sort of what we call the star of the show kind of thing. And we do that Monday through Thursday, 4 nights of plant medicine. People arrive either Saturday or Sunday, and that night, Saturday and Sunday, are breathwork nights. So we ease them in. What's amazing and why I think breathwork and plant medicine work so well together is that they offer many of the same benefits and the same experiences. I'll often say that they both open the door to our consciousness, but the breath work will open that door and gently beckon you in, and the plant medicine will open that door, and when you're not looking, it'll kick your ass in there and shut the door and then shake up the room until and it won't let you out until you want to come up, until it wants to let you out. So it's kind of nice to prepare for that experience by having a similar experience with the breath work, but having, the breath, it's both an asset and a liability that the breath work has an escape hatch, which means if you stop engaging in the technique, you'll come down from your experience. That's an asset in the sense that if you're really concerned, in the plant medicine, you can't do that. You've got to ride it out. The breath work, you can ramp it down. It's a liability in that the good news is that your stuff is really coming up. And when you really get the flow of the process, you want your stuff to come up. You want the scary stuff or the negative stuff and all that, because it's coming up to be released, to be purged, to be integrated. And if you abort your process right in the middle of it, you really haven't done yourself much of a service, because you haven't given yourself a chance to fully let go of that stuff.
We'll be right back at you after this brief but important announcement. If you're someone that wants to be healthy, chances are the reason you want to be healthy, if you really drill down, is because you want to be happy. Well, what makes you happy is getting melatonin in your veins at night. It's getting serotonin and dopamine in your brain during the day. Do you know what makes those neurotransmitters and hormones happen? It's light. And if you are exposed to artificial blue and green light after dark and even during the day, you're suppressing your ability to produce these within your body. I don't want to get too geeky and scientific because I would stumble over my words and you might not even understand what I'm talking about. But after over 3 years of interviewing experts, a couple hundred of them now, one of the underlying causes of all disorders and disease is artificial light at night. And if you just think about it from a common sense, nature-based point of view, we have not evolved to see this very narrow spectrum of blue light that exists in your LED lighting on your computer and probably inside your house, and headlights and street lights as you drive around at night. And anytime you go to the movies or a club or watch TV, anywhere you go at night, you're seeing a spectrum of light that doesn't exist in nature and that we haven't evolved to see. We've evolved to only see firelight and starlight and some moonlight at night. And so we've completely hijacked our bodies. We've become domesticated. And this is really, really harmful. Now, it's easy to fix. You can still live your life. Live your life. Go out, go clubbing, have a ball. But you just have to wear your Blue Blocks glasses. So go to blueblocks.com. That's spelled BLUBLOX, blueblocks.com. And get yourself some of these dope glasses. They have a few different frame styles. They do prescriptions. They do reading glasses. And they do non-prescription glasses that block the different spectrums of harmful blue and green light. So go to blueblocks.com. Enter the code LIFESTYLIST at checkout to save 15%. That's LIFESTYLIST at blueblocks.com. And now, back to the interview. It's interesting that your breathwork comes later in the week after the 4 plant medicine ceremonies. It's sort of counterintuitive, I think, because it's a more mild experience and one that you do have some degree of control over, that would come first and kind of get people acclimated to these different states of consciousness, and then you would work in to the medicine. Was it ever done that way, or did you guys just know from the beginning you wanted to get people on the medicine and then ease them back into, quote unquote normal life
Right.
with the
Well,
breath.
I guess I didn't explain it quite right. We actually bookend the medicine experiences with the breath work. So we ramp them up in the beginning.
Oh, okay. I got here on Sunday.
Yeah.
So that Sunday night, so I missed. Okay, I got it.
So there's a few people who come in Sunday and miss it altogether.
Right.
But ideally, you either arrive Saturday and you might miss Saturday night, so you've got Sunday night to do the breath work. Or if you arrive in time, you've got Saturday and Sunday to do the breath work.
Got it.
And then you go into the plant medicine. And at the end of the week, then, what it really does is three things. First, it helps tie up any loose ends. So, the plant medicine experiences, can have you going to all different dimensions of your being. And sometimes you want to wrap that all up and you want to, tie up those loose ends, bring things to completion. So the breath really helps do that. Second, it really starts to give people the consciousness of returning home and recognizing that there's something that they can continue to practice at home. Most people aren't going to go and find a plant medicine ceremony in their neighborhood in the next week. And I don't advise that either. One, because most places it's illegal. And two, the safety concerns that we address here aren't, necessarily in place at somebody's living room.
Yeah. I was thinking about that last night in ceremony. I was like, I'm so glad I'm not in like someone's apartment in Venice right now. Like, that does not sound like a good idea. I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends and colleagues have experiences right in LA, and I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't want to be in like a field of EMFs and all that weird fucking energy in a city on the medicine. I love being out here because it's like,
it's a very natural experience.
Yeah, just and being, even though the medicine is not from Costa Rica, we're still in that part of the world in this tropical jungle sort of climate, and just the way the wind sounds and the types of plants and trees and the whole sort of integration of this natural habitat is completely just a perfect setting for it.
Right. So people come here, they do the plant medicine, but they have to return home, and it's like, so how do I take this experience with me? And it's like the breath work is a way to continue to evolve your experience without having to find, an ayahuasca person or go under the radar or whatever in your own neighborhood. But the third thing that it really does, and probably the most powerful, is that it helps people claim their experience as their own. And what I mean by that is whenever we add something external to us, we have a tendency to attribute our experience to that thing. So I mentioned that plant medicine and breathwork are both just catalysts to open the doors, but they open the door to our consciousness. It's like what you experience comes from within you, and the beauty and the realizations and all the discoveries are part of your divine intelligence. And when you receive that same type of experience through breath work, where nothing external was added to you, there's something that clicks on a deeper conscious level. It's like, oh yeah, I get it. I have this within me inherent. I don't have to necessarily have these external props to get me there. Now, Rythmia, was started by our CEO, Jerry Powell, and in his downloads, he got that, this place would offer shortcuts to our, to hacking our consciousness essentially. And that was going to be plant medicine and breath work. And so it is like, these external things like the plant medicines are valuable. My point really is to recognize that they're valuable in opening us up to what already exists within us. And the breath work really drives that message home because there is nothing external that we're using, and yet we're still able to achieve those states.
Great. That's a great distinction. I think it was on the first night. They all kind of are turning into one night now, but maybe it was the second one, whatever it was. I took my first cup of the jungle juice and just kind of took a nap, and nothing much really happened. And then took the second one, and nothing really much was happening. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that was. I mean, I had a little experience, and then it kind of just faded away, and I started feeling sort of back to my regular state of consciousness, and went outside for a bit. And then I came back in and laid down. It just like hit me like a ton of bricks, just like, whoa, okay, holy shit, I was taken on this amazing ride. And the thought came to me, oh, it was just a brief intermission, like in a movie. And then I just was laughing my ass off. Every time I thought of that word, I would just lay on my mattress just cracking up. And I was like, what is so funny about that intermission? Why do I find that so humorous? I'm not like high on weed or something where you just laugh at stupid shit. There's, with this medicine, it seems there's sort of multiple meanings behind some sort of emotional reaction like that. Mm-hmm. And then right when I had that question arise, I saw the word split up in front of me, almost like in a big giant font. And it said inner mission, like INNER. And then that was equally hilarious because I realized that what the medicine's doing, and as you're saying, the breath work is it takes you on this inner mission. And it's really a mission of your own capacities for getting in touch with that universal consciousness and your relationship to it as part of it.
Yeah, well put.
And so there is, a nudge from the medicine or a nudge from the breath or whatever modality one is using, but ultimately it is your experience, your subjective experience of God, So, yeah. And then last night it was like, okay, there's the intermission, but then there's enter mission. ENTR. That one came through. I was
step through that door.
Yeah, enter the mission. And, of course, the mission is awakening. It's enlightenment. It's becoming conscious to the ultimate reality. Question for you. Have you or does anyone ever get into doing breath work while under the influence of ayahuasca?
We generally don't recommend it here and the main reason is both of them are very activating agents, right? So if you take the ayahuasca, that's the activating agent. If you're to do breath work during ayahuasca, you might just go a little too far or, too far for yourself. However, that being said, one of the reasons we do breath at the beginning of the week is to introduce people to the breath as a tool, which you can use very effectively during your journeys with the plant medicine. So in other words, if you're having an experience that takes you, as we were talking about earlier, dredges up some darkness or, makes you face some things that you had tried to block out in early stages of your life, again, that's the good news because that's helping you move through those. But during that process, it can be a little disconcerting. You can feel some heavy emotions and you can just not like it. It can be not pleasant. Working with the breath during those times in a gentler fashion. So you do essentially do the technique that we teach here, only scale it down. Let it be a gentler flow to the breath, and that can help move you through periods of unease or scaredness or any of those emotional states that can arise because you're experiencing something that's not that pleasant, but it's on its way out. So it can help really usher that along and move it from your consciousness.
Yeah, that makes good sense. I can't imagine doing more aggressive breath work on the medicine.
No.
When I ingest that stuff, which is kind of, I think I was telling Jerry yesterday in our interview, to me it sort of kind of tastes like Jägermeister. There's this licorice sort of prune flavor. It's weird, but it's not that unpleasant to me. It's not like I would go buy it at Whole Foods, like a decaf version of it and drink it as a elixir or something. But it's not horrible. But once it's in my stomach, it's like, whew, I've not gotten sick, knock on wood, which I'm very grateful for. But there is like a sense of nausea and not dizziness, but just definitely, I don't want to move around. Let me just put it that way, especially when I'm in a wave of like that deep experience. Like I don't move a muscle. But then what happens is because I'm allowing myself to be so still and just surrender to the experience is that I find myself, I stop breathing. And sometimes for long periods of time to the point where there was a couple moments where I thought, can I stop breathing altogether? And, there's no time when you're in the medicine. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how long it was, but I felt like I, at one point, laid there for a really long time with just my breath exhaled and not breathing at all, to the point where I was like, I might die if I just keep doing this. Like, it went on forever. And then finally I was like, maybe this is not safe. And I, allowed myself to take a breath. But it's interesting in the more gentle breath. What I find is that if my body starts to tense up and there's any resistance to this super powerful experience, all I have to do is just kind of like, just take a belly breath, and then I melt back into the mattress just, I don't know, like a big slab of pate, just like, blah. But it's the breath that brings me back to that surrender. I find if I stop breathing, then the body starts to tense back up. So I can see.
That gets into the physiology of breaths and emotions. Each emotion we have has a corresponding breath pattern. And those that we tend not to like, fear, anxiety, stress, come with a shallower breath pattern, or where we end up holding the breath altogether. So, if we perpetually do that, we will induce these states of anxiousness or these states of feeling stressed out or tense. On the flip side, the feelings that we enjoy, generally speaking, peace, love, happiness, come with a more fluid, deeper, and continuous breath pattern. So, the whole science of breathwork is to induce these states that we enjoy, or to remove the states that we don't, by engaging in a breath pattern that is in alignment with what we're after. So that's exactly what the technique is.
That makes perfect sense. In terms of your own experience with ayahuasca, had you done it before you came here, or how long have you been working with that medicine?
I had done it. First time I did it was 6 years ago, and I had a pretty heavy duty experience that didn't I didn't feel like I needed to do it again. I ended up doing it 2 years after that, and then I had another heavy duty experience. I was like, I don't need.
When you did the first two times, was it a series of ceremonies like we're doing here, or just a one-off?
No, just a one-off.
Okay.
For me. I mean, it was like a weekend. You could have done 2 in a row or something, but I just did one. And then waited another 2 years, and then I was introduced to Rythmia, and so since then I've probably done 35 ceremonies or something like that.
And is this something you imagine that you'll continue to do, or do you feel at any point you'll kind of, okay, I get it, I've accomplished what I want to accomplish, and then just do your breath work?
Well,
what's the sense? I mean, you can't predict the future, but what's the sense you get sitting here right now? Are you like, yeah, I could see myself doing this multiple times, or are you in the end of an arc? Because some of the people that, I guess the shaman that are running things last night, specifically, I believe her name was Sarah, that I spoke with last night. She it's so interesting, but I went and talked to her, and I was just so fascinated by her. When I was under the medicine, she was dancing and stomping around and playing music and singing. I was just like enthralled with her energy, and so I had to go talk to her afterward, and she explained her journey. And anyway, it's a long story, but perhaps I'll get to interview her at some point. But I was like, so how often do you do this? She's like, oh, usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday every week. And I was like, you do this all the time? She's like, oh yeah, I'm on the medicine right now. We're all on it, like all of the helpers and the various shaman and stuff. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You can like operate like a kind of a normal person and have your faculties on this shit? I can't even move, So it was interesting, and I got the sense from her that it's just like, this is her life. She's just on the medicine all the time and healing people with it. Is your journey ever going to evolve into something like that? Or is it just like
for
a here
me,
and there thing?
I see again, with all these, they are all tools: meditation, breath work, plant medicine, whatever other forms, movement even can be a tool for opening up our consciousness, basically. And I feel like all the tools are valid, and to me, while the resource is available, I allow myself to partake in it and allow that tool to be useful to me. Like I said, when I go back to the U.S., my life takes me in a new direction beyond Rythmia. I'll probably focus what I was focusing on before, which is my breath work, and sharing that with people and showing people that is a valid method of opening our consciousness, releasing our emotional and energetic garbage, and that will lead some people. I'll always have this experience with me, and this sort of what we call it, point on my resume, essentially, that people will be interested in, and so I'll be able to guide people, who are curious about the medicine, whether it's something that they should go explore or not. Which, in most cases, I'd say it's a good thing. There are few people that I might steer away from that, but to come here anyway, you have to go through a screening process, and the kind of people that we'd steer away, have a history of deep psychological issues, or they're on medications, or they got physical issues that might be contraindicative to just the safety of being on the medicine. So, we want to give as many people the experience as possible, but we also want to make sure that it's safe for them physically, emotionally, and psychologically. Yeah, so.
When I was in ceremony, actually all 3 nights, I had flashes of almost every single person I care about. And especially last night, I really saw just like how much I've been injured and harmed and all of the trauma. And I'm not being melodramatic. I mean, it's just a fact, just looking at my childhood and just so many things I've experienced that I was, were perpetrated on me, or that I later perpetrated on myself in an effort to absolve myself of that pain and that trauma. And looking at that, and then I started looking at all the touch point relationships in my life, and I could not come up with one person that hadn't been horribly traumatized in their life,
Yeah.
It's like everyone I've ever dated, every member of my family, like the whole lineage going back to great-grandparents. It was just like, wow, everyone has just been completely banged up by the human experience. And so I started, oh man, when I get home, I got to tell so-and-so to go and this person to go. And I'm like, you guys have to do this. And I don't like to proselytize. And, if people don't invite my opinion, I tend to not give it, except on the podcast. But yeah, I just started thinking, and then there were a couple of people I thought, oh, this would be great for them, and I thought, no, too fragile because of those other, physical issues, psychological issues, different medications and things like that. I thought, no, they'd have to work through some of that first. I think that's really sound wisdom on your part, and I can appreciate the container of safety here too. That makes a lot of sense.
So we do a good job, and when people call to come, and I say, if somebody's listening and they're questioning, well, am I that kind of person, or should I not go, or should I call and try to and interface with those who the first line of Rythmia, basically, because they'll ask you these questions and they'll give you a sense of whether it's a good idea or not. And some of the hard lines are if you're on certain kind of psychotropic medications, that you need to be clean from those for 30 days before coming, and you need to spend whatever time ramping down from them to get clean for 30 days, because most of those you can't go cold turkey on. Pharmaceuticals are heavy duty drugs.
Yeah, I've experienced that. I was on antidepressants many years ago, and if I would run out, I would start to go crazy. I'd be calling my shrink, like, can you leave some at the front desk? I think sometimes he could even put them in the bushes, like in front of the office building in Beverly Hills, and I was like, this is weird. I think I'm addicted to this shit. Eventually, thankfully, for me, I'm not recommending anyone else feel the need to get off your medication. But for me, it was like, oh my God, once I got off it, I felt so much more sane. But who knows, maybe it got me through a period that I wouldn't have survived. You just don't know when you're suicidal, as I was. And
there's
like
values for these things, but in general, we offer them with a easy hand, and tend to end up becoming dependent on them more than necessary in a lot of cases.
So. There definitely seems to be a lot of misdiagnosis of people processing trauma they've experienced and mental illness. It seems to me a lot of what we call mental illness is just people in pain that don't have a means by which to process that pain and heal from it. So yeah, it's an interesting paradigm. But thank God you guys don't take people on 5 different psych meds and put them in that fucking ceremony room. That would,
but with
that'd
that,
be an interesting experience.
With that thought, I just want to follow that, is that if you are on those meds and you feel like it's like there's something more that the meds aren't doing, the side effects are worse than the positive effects, and you really would like to find some alternative. This is what this experience at Rythmia, the plant medicine, seems to help a lot of people to rebalance. Like you said, you may use those meds to get you through some period of life, but when you realize that this isn't a sustained endeavor, you can't stay on those meds forever without suffering some serious effects, that you may choose to wean yourself off, and then to have this kind of experience that's going to help you rebalance in a way that you can sustain going home in your life. So.
Love it, dude. I got one more question for you. It's a 3-parter. So I've learned so much from you today, as have our listeners. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced your life, your work, that you might recommend the listeners of the show go check out for themselves?
3 teachers. Well, so first of all would be Paramahansa Yogananda. That was the spiritual guru who started the Self-Realization Fellowship, came from India to America in 1920s. The second Indian to really spread Eastern teachings here. And so now all the things you see today, Ganesh t-shirts and yoga studios and namaste and all this, all is commonplace these days because of these pioneers, Yogananda and Vivekananda before him. So he's definitely one I think is a world teacher, and no matter what faith you're in or whatever, if you really read his stuff with an open heart, there's a lot of wisdom to learn there. Then I would probably go to a breathwork teacher, probably my breathwork teacher, Judith Kravitz. You can read her book, Breathe Deep, Laugh Loudly, or get into that whole field and wisdom of breathwork, which to me is our fundamental tool. It's what our fundamental God-given tool that can help us navigate through these treacherous waters of life with a lot more ease and grace and elegance. And then third, I'd say Greg Braden comes to mind.
I love him.
Greg Braden.
I got to get him on the show one of these days.
Yeah, do. Maybe great. I may be able to connect you because nice. He came here to Rythmia, and he loved the breathwork so much that he invited me to go do it for him at his event last year, From Cell to Soul, it's called, in New Mexico. We're doing it again this year in March in New Mexico, and he's just got a great, he's a scientist, I'd say spiritual scientist, where he posits theories on on things that have to do with human evolution and such on a much more spiritual level, based on evidence that most people have dismissed because it isn't in alignment with the common prevailing theories of the day. And much against what we think science should do is take evidence and say, oh, here's something new. Let's see if we need to make a new theory as a result of this new evidence. They say this evidence doesn't fit our prevailing theory. Let's put it in the closet and stay with our theories here. So he really looks at this evidence and makes makes postulations about what mankind is really all about. And I think the beautiful thing about that is how we can solve the issues, our impending issues of the future, based on some of this evidence and wisdom. So he's a great guy to. That's
great, man. Yeah, I love him. You're the first one to ever cite him as one of your influences. So I'm glad to be reminded of him. Yeah, you used to. read some of his books and his audiobooks. There was one in particular that was all about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he talked about this fourth mode of prayer, I think he called it, where, indigenous peoples we typically use a couple forms of prayer, I forget what they are, but anyway, the prayer was that when you're praying for something, you're praying as if it's already happened, and you're giving gratitude for that thing as a reality, because on a quantum level, everything does already exist, right? And so that's something I picked up from him, and I've been using ever since, going back, I don't know, God, at least 15 years ago or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
he's been around since the 90s, and the final word on him is just he's an incredibly nice guy. Like, you would never know that he's as a bigwig as he is when you're interacting with him. He's just kind. He's like focused on you, and he seems to like me. So
right on, man. Well, congratulations on getting to do some stuff with him. That's great. In closing, where can we find you? Mention your website. Give us your website again. Anything social media, anything you want to share and point people toward?
Well, I am R. Christian Minson, the letter R, and then Christian Minson, Minson, on Facebook, Instagram, the YouTube. My website is breathflow.com, BREATHF as in fabulous, LOW.com. And there, you can find a little more about breathwork and my schedule of events, which needs a little bit of updating right now. But and then, of course, Rythmia.com, RYTHMIA, no H after the R, for finding out more about what's going on here at Rythmia. And so I'd say those links will get people far.
Well, thank you so much for your time, man. And I look forward to doing some breath with you.
Right on. Thank you.
Dude. Yeah, brother. That concludes our interview with Christian. Makes me want to do some breath work right about now as I sit here and record the bits and pieces that were missing from this 2-part series. I love breathing. In fact, before I recorded here today, now that I'm back at my home studio, I actually went outside and did some breathing exercises while hanging upside down, doing a little inversion therapy. Sometimes it's really fun to, don't do that at home, kids. I was doing it on a machine called the back revolution, which kind of locks your legs in and you can hang upside down. I wasn't doing like breath work that can make you pass out, by the way, because that could be dangerous. But I'm reminded as I review this interview how important the breath work is, and also of the many really rather psychedelic heart and mind-opening experiences I've had with breath. So whether or not you endeavor to ever try any plant medicines that could or could not be your journey, I guess you'll know by the end of part 2 here, if that's something you're interested in, or perhaps you've already done that. But let's not forget the power of the natural high of our breath. So that concludes Christian. Thank you very much for listening. We're going to now jump right into my second interview that took place the same day. As I recall, and my memory could be spotty because there was so much going on so many levels and so many dimensions during my week at Rythmia. But I think I grabbed my equipment and then ran into my interview with Dr. Jeff Mcnary, who's been working in the healthcare field for 25 years. And according to him, he's seen firsthand that the current Western system of healthcare is truly deficient in healing the population. That's why today, Dr. McNary's work bridges ancient modalities such as plant medicine with modern psychology. And this second interview was a really important conversation for me, as I mentioned in the intro in part 1, just due to the fact that I have such a profound relationship with drugs in my past. And, while we don't necessarily refer to ayahuasca and some of the other plant medicines as drugs, when it comes down to it, they are, you know what I mean? Or derivative of a plant that is now a drug. And so since I had some history in addiction, it was really important for me to get Jeff's take on this and to really hear from him his firsthand experience in working in recovery for so many years and treating so many people with mental and emotional disorders. And it gave me a lot of confidence that I was on the right path. I mean, I was already a couple days in here. I'd done a couple ceremonies with a couple to go. So I felt that my intuition had guided me correctly and that this was a beneficial and a great learning experience for me in general. But it was really cool to hear from him in this interview, like what was actually going on in my brain, and that I was indeed safe and that I didn't have to worry about coming back to California and ending up in a liquor store or a crack house or any of the other sordid places that I found myself in earlier in life so many years ago. So I was really glad to get his take on it. And this is just also a really fun conversation too. Jeff's a great guy, very down to earth, super smart, but very relatable. So you're going to really enjoy this one. Here's what we talk about in this conversation with Jeff McNary: how the staff at Rythmia ensures that the plant medicine experience is safe for everyone involved, which is really important to me. So I don't want to be freaking out and end up wandering through the jungle alone. You know what I'm saying? The fact that a lot of what we call mental illness is just people in pain without any way to process that pain. The irony of using a drug to get off drugs, aka why plant medicine is so effective for treating addiction. Then we talk about the fact that the first 2 nights I had these incredibly deep psychedelic experiences, yet left feeling even more committed to my drug-free life. There is some irony here that he does a great job of explaining. Then the differences between iboga and ayahuasca, experientially and physically. And then how plant medicines actually help you work your way through trauma and begin the healing process. And why we can't connect with other people until we get truly connected to ourselves. Why Rythmia accepts people who are shunned or devalued in many Western medical facilities due to their particular mental illnesses. What science is starting to learn about the pineal gland and DMT. This was a really cool part of the conversation. That tripped me out. And it's going to trip you out too. And then finally, we talk about how a dog helped me find God. So sit back and enjoy this interview with Jeff McNary. If you're the sciencey type and you want to mix your science with a little of the woo-woo spirituality and get esoteric, this is going to be the conversation with you. After this talk, we've got some more field reports after ceremony 3 and 4 that you won't want to miss. You are now a guest on the Lifestylist podcast, Jeff. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to meet you, dude.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming to Rythmia.
Absolutely.
It's a crazy place in a great way.
It is a trip.
Yes, it is.
So I'm excited to interview you specifically. I interviewed Brandy, Jerry, and Christian already. You'll be the 4th, I guess, and I think the 4th and final interview in this process. And one of the things that I find so fascinating about plant medicine, whether it be iboga, ayahuasca, whatever, is its application for addiction, alcoholism, etc. And you have an extensive experience in psychotherapy and working in rehabs and all this kind of stuff. I'm like super stoked to talk to you about this because of all things bizarre about ayahuasca that I'm discovering now that I've had it on 3 nights, is that people use a drug to get off drugs.
Yeah.
And coming from the paradigm of recovery and sobriety that I do,
sure.
When I got sober, one of the big barriers to entry was that I had to quit smoking weed.
Yeah.
I was just like, God, I give up heroin, sure. Crack, please take fucking crack out of my life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not even fun, but I can't stop doing it. And then, even alcohol just got to be such a drag. But letting go of the weed, every time I would try to sober up and keep smoking weed, I'd eventually end up back on drugs, and be strung out horribly. And then once I finally surrendered to that, it was like, okay, I get it. I'm sober now, which is, 22 years ago, just about in a couple weeks. And then once I surrendered the idea that I couldn't smoke weed, I just thought, okay, well, I'm never doing any kind of drug ever again, let alone a really potent psychedelic.
Sure.
And here I am, 3 days into this, feeling extremely sober. Like, there's no part of me that's like, oh, maybe I'll go home and smoke weed now. Or
clear-minded.
I wish I had some wine. Or, it's just like, there's no way I'm going into a relapse as a result of ingesting this medicine.
Exactly.
I have a sense that, say I was back in LA and someone gave me a line of Coke, I'll probably end up in prison or on the streets. Like, where that takes me historically is this chain reaction of triggering that mental obsession and the physical allergy and all that.
Correct.
So I find it so fascinating that this particular medicine, or some could call it a drug, I guess the distinction would be in your intention in doing it to escape yourself or to go within yourself, which would be the case of medicine. But I find it so fascinating that here I am and I'm not triggered in any way whatsoever. In fact, I feel more committed to having a drug and alcohol-free life than ever, because there's like even less of a reason to use that as a coping mechanism now.
Correct.
That I'm experiencing this heart opening and this healing throughout the past 4 days or so. So that's a long sort of intro statement / question that's going to lead me into just a little bit, maybe an abbreviated version of your background in mental health work and addiction. Like, where do you come from, and when did the plant medicines enter into your lexicon of tools?
Okay, so those are all, I'm excited, by the way, to talk about this stuff, because this is like right up my alley. Yeah,
I had a feeling.
Yeah, it's perfect. I have a master's in public health from UCLA, and I also have my doctorate in psychology. And I've been working in healthcare about 25, almost 30 years. Worked for the Department of Health of Hawaii. Mostly my career has been in LA. And I've been managing healthcare agencies, big ones, for 15 years. One of them being Passages Malibu, where I was the administrative director for about 8 years. And I've been working in a private practice, and I was running clinics at UCLA and working in locked psychiatric units in Pasadena and all kinds of different stuff with the really most severe patient populations, which is trauma, addiction, and acute mental health. So those are my peeps, and I love them, and they're awesome people. So I learned a lot from them too. Like, when you're working with people that are struggling severely, the clinicians, if they're good, I believe, learn from their patients too. So it's not a one-way street. It's like a dual thing. So I am who I am today because of all the people I've worked with. It's not all this studying I did in 18 years of grad school and $500,000 in student loans. It's none of that crap. It's the people I worked with as patients that's led me to this. So, what happened was, I've always been a rebel in healthcare ever since the beginning. And I knew going into it that it wasn't a system that was efficient, in my opinion, because I grew up in a part of Los Angeles where it was low income, underserved. It was a rough area. A lot of my buddies are in jail or died, and it's just a rough place. Now, it's not so rough now. We all know things have changed on the east side of Los Angeles, right? Southeast, northeast side. Yeah. But it was when I was a kid. It was totally different. And what I realized about the system of healthcare, even at a young age, was that this isn't curing or helping people in a way that we really need to. Now, as far as like, if I get into a car accident, I definitely want to have a Western doctor helping me fix my body, like trauma-related stuff, like physical, cool. But if I have mental health issues, if I have addiction, if I have a history of being abused, there's not a lot of stuff that's, I believe, effective for people. And it just spins them out into worse situations. And it's all liability prone from the practitioner's side. So they have to do these certain protocols that really are not effective, in my opinion. So when I was at Passages, I was working, and that was sort of back then. Now it's, there's a lot of let's say 12-step places now. But back then, it was like the first sort of non-12-step place. So it was kind of like just another place if people didn't want to do the 12 steps, even though we took them to meetings every night if they wanted to go. But it didn't do like a 12-step work at the place.
Oh,
right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
I didn't know
more
that.
Therapy. It did more spiritual counseling, did a lot of body work, did a lot of meditation. It was kind of more like Buddhist Zen sort of vibe rehab. That's kind of what it was. And I liked that, And, people that went to other places want to go to 12-step. That's cool, right? But we were just kind of the first one that didn't have that per se as its main focus. So I was learning all these different kind of holistic ways to work with people that have addiction. And I was like, still seeing the relapse rate was very high. And even there, it's kind of a nationwide stat. It's like 12%. If they do a rehab stay, will stay sober. So that's not that great, right? So Jerry showed up, the CEO of Rythmia, and he was just this animal. I mean, he was just a difficult dude. And, I would interview people, and I'm sure he probably told you a little bit about this, but from my perspective, it was very interesting because I had to meet every guest when they got there and determine what treatment team would be best for them. Because I had all these therapists and MFTs and all these people, right? And I would kind of match them up. So when I met Jerry, I'm like, there's nobody that can, I don't want to turn him loose on my staff because he'll eat him alive. So I said, all right, I'm just going to suck it up and I'm going to work with him. Because him and I sort of had this vibe together, like it could kind of be cool. So I started working with him, and I was running the facility. I didn't take patients, I was running the facility, but I took him. And we worked together for 5 years, not inpatient, for 2 months inpatient, and then another 5 years outpatient. And we were both at our wits' end. What do we do? He's still tripping on doing drugs. He stopped doing Demerol. That's what he came to passages for. He didn't come for the other things. But, so he's still womanizing and fighting in Malibu, getting into a fight at Nobu, that kind of craziness. And doing drugs, coke and all this, drinking like a fish. He did plant medicine in Costa Rica on a whim. He was challenged to do it by somebody, and he did it, and it changed his life. And he called me immediately. So I was like, dude, I know a little bit about plant medicine. I've heard about it. I've read a couple things, but I don't know a ton about it. So I said, I'm in, dude. I'll come check it out. I flew down here, and a couple weeks later, I was with him and his son and one of our workers, our assistants, Hamid, who works with us. He's not an assistant. He's a manager of our Malibu office. And we did it, and it just completely changed my life. It was incredible. And I didn't even really know what I was there to work on. Because I was already working as psychology stuff, and I have to do all this therapy on myself to get my degree. So, I was like, I'm married, got some kids. I was like, I'm cool, right? Like, I'm good enough. Not the case. I was a mess, and I just was hiding it. And I wasn't really happy. And so I learned how to connect with myself, and it just completely changed my life. So that's where Jerry and I wanted to have a spot where we could have safe, medically licensed, people could feel comfortable. We could be like a bridge between Western medicine and indigenous sort of jungle medicine, right? Which is kind of intimidating for a lot of people. Even though it's really cool, it's kind of rough to ask, a CEO mom who's a single mom to go to Peru and climb up a mountain for a week. I mean, they do it, but it's a lot to ask. So this is a little bit more approachable, here. That's basically like how this all started for me.
Was your first ceremony with Iboga?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What subjectively, I'm assuming you've done ayahuasca since.
Yeah, a bunch.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
What subjectively for you is the difference between those two plants?
Well, what they say, and I believe this to be true, is that, ayahuasca is kind of like the mother, like the maternal loving sort of Mother Earth vibe that kind of nurtures you and helps you see things and kind of mothers you. And it's not another good way to say that, I guess. Just, it's like your mom who's loving. And Iboga is like your stern grandfather who's not going to take any crap, who's going to kick your butt and show you what you're doing wrong and you better change it. He's going to show you who you are, what you've been doing, why your spiritual self is pissed off and unplugged, and what you need to do to resolve it. So it's just like crystal clear what you need to do. Those are the two differences.
And what about like the duration and the number of doses and, like the physical feeling, the propensity to vomit and purge and all that? Is all of that similar? Or
It's
are they
a little
different?
different. It's a little different. Like when you take ayahuasca, it's more of like what we would call in medicine a depressant, where it kind of makes you, people get anxiety sometimes, but it kind of relaxes you. It makes you kind of chill and sometimes sleep a bit. Whereas Iboga, it's a stimulant.
Oh,
so, but you have ataxia during it, which means that you don't really have much control over your muscles. You can get up and walk around, but it's just kind of like you're a little unstable. You need some help, but your mind is just going, just clicking, and you're awake, and you're not sleeping at all. And that lasts about 12 hours or so.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Oh my God, that sounds terrifying.
It's a little rough, right? But ayahuasca, as you've noticed, right, is if you just drink once, like a certain dose, 2 to 4 hours, if you just drink once, and then it's pretty much over. That's like the half-life is 2 to 4 hours of the active ingredient.
Yeah, the first 2 nights I took the first one and just kind of slept and relaxed. And, felt a little something buzzing, but nothing not the alien invasion shit. And then the first 2 nights on the second one, I was maybe 15 minutes after taking that shot. I was like, the phrase that keeps coming to me every night, including the first 2, was when it starts to happen, the phrase that comes is, "You got to be fucking kidding me." I just keep saying that. I'm like, just when I think it gets more profound and more strange and beautiful, I'm like, then another level unfolds. And I'm like, now you've really got to be fucking kidding me. Are you serious? I kept saying that last night. I was like, "You fucking serious right now?" And I'm saying it out loud, just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But so the first 2 went like that. And the second night, dude, it had been hours and hours since I did it. So we must have walked out of the ceremony space at 1:30 a.m. after going in at 5:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And started to feel, sort of stabilized. I took a cold shower and then I lay down in bed, dude, and boom, it comes back. And I'm like, seriously? I was kind of done. I'm good for the night, and I was kind of going, really? I would love to sleep. And then, it was fine eventually. But And then last night, I took a double dose
to start
in the first.
Good. Yeah.
And that, dude, it was insane. It felt like I was laying there having the experiences I was having, which, I'll go into perhaps in a solo part of the show or something, but just amazing revelations and realizations and much more, I don't even want to say mental activity, but a lot more communication going on with myself, higher self, spirit, the medicine, whatever, like asking questions, getting answers, time traveling, seeing other people, communicating with people from my past, family members, lineage of ancestry, all of that. Whereas the first 2 nights, it was just being in consciousness and very few kind of actual revelations that came in the form of an inner knowing. It was just, holy shit, this is what it feels like to be at one with consciousness and really experience being in my soul with very little interference from the ego, the personality, and the mind. So it was almost like it was sort of, the medicine was kind of going, watch this, motherfucker, And I was like, okay, you got my attention. The first 2 nights, kind of like, okay, I'm in. I'm in. This is cool.
Yeah.
And then last night, I just said, where do you want me to go? Where do you want to go? Just do what you got to do. Let's do this. There's no boundaries. There's no limits to what I will face, what I'll look at, what I'll explore. And I just had this immense amount of courage and bravery that I was able to summon. And then we went into some healing stuff, and there were some tears and all of that. And it felt like, as I was saying, that I thought the night was almost over. And during it, I was like, oh, I guess I missed something. They're not doing the second serving.
Yeah.
It was just the one. And maybe that's why I got a double.
Yeah.
And because she said, hey, whoever wants to go deeper, come up first and you get a 2 shots, or 1.5 shots. And so I'm laying there going, cool, this is great. Just one. And then right when I'm in the middle of it still, they're like, okay, calling second serving. Are you kidding me? I go up and talk to the shaman I was like, wasn't the serving? She's like, no, dude, that was an hour and a half like the other nights. I was like, you gotta be. I felt like it's so hilarious. Bizarre. And then, I had a different experience after that was more just really being in the music and the chanting and less realizations. Anyway, I digress. It's difficult to not share the experience because I'm still
exciting.
Still contextualizing it. So I don't know. I don't know where that goes, but it's fascinating that the experience is so different each time, and it's so different throughout the duration of the ceremony. It's just like you have no idea where it's going, and as long as I just completely surrender and just be in that state of trust, and
that's the right approach.
The understanding that I'm safe and no harm can come to me in or out of the ceremony. Just allow it to take me wherever it's supposed to take me. It's been really, really incredible. But I guess I want to go back to, working in the treatment center, and I'd love to hear about some of the experiences you've seen that are similar to Jerry, where you got a guy or woman that doesn't resonate with the 12-step program and is unable to apply that approach, which was very successful for me from day one. It just clicked. I'm in. I did whatever I was told. I was not one of these little punks that wouldn't go to meetings and wouldn't listen to your sponsor.
It was a good structure for you.
Yeah, I'm all in. Like
cool.
I don't want to ever use again. That's my thing. I would have become a fucking Hare Krishna and sold books at the airport if that's what I had to do. Honestly, totally. there was no resistance to any of it.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people, that is not the case. And so, the way Jerry explained it, he was like, I hated meetings. I went to rehab. He's like, I couldn't stand those fucking meetings. And then I took a boga and I'm cured. And now the guy can like drink a glass of wine here and there. I'm like, what?
Yeah. It's totally unorthodox, sort of
it is
counterintuitive way to look at things. Yeah. It's interesting.
So give me, your perspective as a clinician who's seen, I'm sure, so many hopeless cases of people that can't get sober. Give me some of your top healing stories, how someone's been rendered sober or free of addiction using plant medicine.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to preface that a little bit. It's like, my opinion on addiction is that everybody who is a quote unquote addict has trauma, whether it's historical before they started using and they're drinking or using to like kind of deal with it, or they create trauma by their addiction.
Both for
Both
me, yeah.
things, yeah.
Totally.
Both happen.
Totally.
And what plant medicine is really good for is trauma. It resolves trauma. And it's interesting because, like, how does that happen? Well, the way it works is the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex link up during ayahuasca ceremonies. And the prefrontal cortex is our conscious, rational self. The amygdala is the subconscious part of the brain. And the emotions that get stored there during trauma, they come out and you get to deal with them and they move through you. And that's why people feel like amazing after they do it, because it might have been a rough night, might have had some tears or some realizations that were hard, but it's doable for the person. And they build new neurochemical pathways that don't have trauma associated with those memories, the emotional side. The emotional part gets released. They still have the memories per se, but it's not got the teeth that it used to have. And so that's why it's really good for addiction, is because it resolves trauma. That part's beautiful. The other part is that it balances neurochemistry. So drugs, let's say heroin or alcohol or whatever, it messes with your neurochemistry. It causes dopamine deficiencies. It causes serotonin surges that are not natural. And it's kind of like you're giving your brain this extra source of stuff, and the brain gets used to it. And then when you stop, then you have all this withdrawal and cravings and all the rest of it. So with plant medicine, right? And the reason why it's like I look at it differently than like a drug, I look at it as a medicine, is because it doesn't do that. It doesn't deplete the brain of its neurochemical responses. It resets them all. And so when you have a reset neurochemical profile in your brain, cravings are not there, physical ones are not there. You've worked on the trauma, so your emotional sort of triggers are not triggers anymore. And you've kind of come at it with a two-speared approach, which what addiction is based on, in my opinion, because there's the whole craving thing that's physical. There's that whole underlying issue stuff that's not resolved. And plant medicine hits both of them. So that's what I love about it. It's very cool.
That's fascinating, man. I can't help like reflecting back to the experiences I was having last night in that first round. And dude, I mean, I've done so much therapy. I've done, the Hoffman process. I've done the one in On-Site in Nashville. I mean, I've done deep dives, emotive therapy, banging pillows, role playing with your mean dad and your crazy mom, whatever. All that shit. And just like getting what I feel is getting the trauma out and like releasing it. And, and there has been a lot of healing, dealing with, the sexual abuse I experienced as a kid and facing that, talking about it openly. I mean, I've talked about it on the show now numerous times, which is still weird, but I think it will help people that have gone through a similar experience to release the shame around it and learn how to heal it. But last night, dude, in regard to the trauma, I didn't go back and experience the trauma as pain, but I was able to objectively really see how badly I was hurt in my life by experiences that I had as a kid. The sexual abuse being, of course, the one that I was led back to, and I kind of knew that was coming. But I've talked about it. I feel like I've processed it. I feel like I've healed. I've forgiven myself. I've forgiven my parents. I've forgiven the perpetrator. Like I feel pretty clear.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I still do have an underlying sense of shame.
Sure. Yeah.
That's taken me a long time to kind of come out of and feel good about who I am. And that's when I first experienced that shame. And so, in the ceremony last night, I was just shown the different points in my life in which I was deeply hurt. And it was like, fuck.
Yeah, it's profound.
Dude, like seeing myself as a kid and just imagining like the shit that I went through. And then as you said, in active addiction, the shit that I did to myself and the situations.
It all makes sense when you look at it like that.
Yeah. And then seeing, almost every relationship I've had with friends, lovers, etc. And every single person in my family has just been hurt terribly.
Yeah.
And just suffered so much trauma. And in that, there was, some crying and some healing and stuff. But
it's healthy.
I was wondering in that process is this actually being healed and removed where I won't be, triggered, for example, like something that in my life that's been, how do I say this in a way that preserves anonymity? having been abused, I wasn't raped technically, but it was a rape of my innocence, which is something I kind of had to just really accept last night too. Like, well, why did that hurt me? And it was that, my innocence at 5 or 6, whenever it was taken. I was no longer the same after that.
Yeah.
And then I've had really close female relationships in my life, 3 of them in particular, primary relationships in which the women were raped. And so like,
kind of a common thread in a sense, right? Emotionally.
Yeah. And so that's a really triggering
of course
concept for me, So as I started to reflect on that and just send prayers and healing and communication to those victims that I've had the opportunity to be close to and care about, I was like, is this process going to release those triggers of the trauma that I experienced as a bystander and as a victim myself,
Yeah.
And I guess it'll be revealed.
Yeah, you'll see soon. And I would bet the house on absolutely yes.
Really?
Oh yeah. Definitely, without question. It will resolve that.
Wow.
Yeah. And the reason is because in your brain, your amygdala, that initial moment, right, when you were 5 or 6, was, first of all, it was super confusing to a 5-year-old. Completely weird and confusing. Then it was probably scary. Then it was, like you said, guilt-ish vibe and maybe some shame. And it could have been a couple other things. And then it gets locked in there. But then, as you're maturing, now you're not 5 or 6 anymore, it's evolved in its understanding, and your brain is sort of like kind of how to deal with it. And so it's kind of morphed into this other sort of monster, And what it's been led you to the drinking and the drugs and all the rest of it, right? That monster led you to that. Now before you came to Rythmia, you killed that monster, you did a lot of work, you cleared out the garage of all the trash and junk, meaning the brain part. And now this here was just a dusting of the corners to make sure it's perfectly set and clean. And so that process right there is what leads you now to be completely in a triggering environment and not be triggered. Now, I'm not saying to go tempt fate, of course, right? 12-step guys would kill me. But don't walk into a bar, at midnight for no reason. Don't do that, right? But But as far as like having that complete healing, you got it, man. You totally got it. And I see that a lot here. I see it every single week. I've had guys that are really successful. Like, let's say I had an attorney from LA come, super successful guy, miserable, kind of like Jerry, successful but miserable, and, resistant and kind of a know-it-all. And that's a rough combo for plant medicine, resistance and knowing it all. So I had a little chat with him just to kind of like ease him in. He was a really nice guy. He freaking had the most amazing experience here. It was incredible. And you know what it broke down to? And to preserve anonymity, I won't say exactly. It broke down to like his relationship with one of his pets that had passed away, and the way he was dismissed as a child for having love for certain things and it wasn't valued. So it's often things from our childhood, and they can be really severe stuff like abuse, but they can also be stuff that's maybe like not so horrific, but it sets a profile and a kind of sets the path for us to like not trust ourselves or not like ourselves or not feel validated in who we are as people. Because this guy was like highly emotionally attuned, but he had like blocked it all because he was embarrassed by it as a child. And so he became this rigid, hardcore attorney guy with no emotion. And that was not his true self at all. And so he broke through that. And the good news is that he's doing even better in his career now. It's not like he throws his career away. He just can do it now in a great way. It's even better.
Wow. Yeah, I'm thinking about that concept of trauma. I recently interviewed a fantastic guest named Mastin Kipp, who's he calls it trauma informed. His work is all about overcoming trauma and healing it. I don't think I asked him about plant medicine because I'm thinking this might be the shortest path to that healing is what I'm getting right now.
Yeah.
But as much as I could understand of his methodology for healing trauma and thus removing those triggers that spin us back out into more trauma and difficult situations, was that this concept that the trauma that we each experience, and pretty much everyone's experienced on some level, subjectively kind of has the same net effect regardless of the severity of the trauma. And so that was something I was reflecting on last night too in ceremony, was like, I mean, I've met people that have had way worse shit happen than happened to me, for sure. I mean, I know people that have been through absolutely horrific experiences for years and years and years.
Yeah.
For me, there was a few points that were rough, you know.
Sure.
But then I was reflecting on some of the people, as I said, that I know, and I could just see their pain and see their, you know, the psychic injuries that they've had, people that I've loved or love still. And I was thinking about one in particular that it's interesting. It's interesting doing these interviews in the middle of
man,
a profound experience.
You're in it, dude.
It's
you're
trippy.
In it. Yeah, but you're doing it, man.
Trippy.
You're in the zone, dude. It's very cool.
So I was seeing this particular person, you know, was not touched a lot as a kid, and I don't think that they were told they were loved, and their parents were good people and good to them.
Just not affectionate like that.
Yeah, and I was thinking, God, that is so fucking traumatic.
It is. Yeah, children require that to feel safe.
Yeah, and you know, no one hit them, or as far as I know, there was no sexual abuse. There was nothing weird. It was just like a suburban family. They were great people, hard workers, provided for the kids, but were disconnected emotionally and didn't have the capacity to provide that touch and that nurturing. And and that absence of that, is the neglect of that, is fucking traumatic.
It is.
You know, and so maybe that person, they have a certain degree of neurosis, or perhaps go into addictions as a result of what was lacking, not necessarily what was proactively done to them, or if they were, victimized by a perpetrator.
Right. Definitely.
Right? What's your perspective on like the degrees of trauma? Because I don't want to minimize someone's trauma who, survived a concentration camp versus me, who someone, touched me when I was 5, It's like, I would choose my experience over some that are much more, dramatic and violent and whatnot.
The way I look at it for trauma, it's like, and what you're saying is totally right on the money. Like that's, I believe, all this sort of approaches that you're explaining. But the way I like to look at it is, when there's a traumatic event, people will do what's called dissociation, and they'll unplug during that traumatic moment from their emotional side. And so their physical side and their emotional side kind of break out. And that's basically fight or flight syndrome is what that is. And it helps them get through a situation that's hard behaviorally as opposed to emotionally, because the emotions are too much. The emotions are confusing and overwhelming, and they don't know what to do with them. And it can be dangerous with emotions. Think of a veteran or a military guy in the war. You don't want the emotions present during a war. You want to be behaviorally doing your thing. And so it's like that. So it's like a minor trauma unplugs you for like a little bit, and then you're back and you feel the emotions, you're scared. A severe trauma breaks you out big time, and it can get stuck like that for the rest of your life. And in the most severe cases, it's a dissociative identity disorder, which is DID, which is like, where people fragment into these different parts of their self. They have all these different identities. And that's a totally extreme end of the spectrum. Whereas the other end, that's kind of more common, little traumas or maybe a childhood of trauma, you kind of get unplugged, and then you kind of come back and you get unplugged, and you can kind of be set like apart a bit. And you can still be successful and still have relationships and still do things, but you don't always feel that you're a part of anything really completely. And you feel like you're the odd one out, even though you have friends and everything, you're doing well in school, but it's like you feel like you're different the whole time.
Wow. I relate to that profoundly. Felt like that my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. And nobody would say that about you to you during that time. They'd be like, no way, man. He's awesome. Looks cool. Right? They would not know that, but you know it. And so what happens then is if you're unplugged like that and you want to like plug back in, but you don't even know that that's your state, have a drink, do a line, smoke a bowl, boom, you're back in temporarily. And you think, wow, I feel normal, whatever that means now.
Yeah.
And I'm plugged into myself, and this is cool. And then it wears off and you're back to like, oh, it's like, that's my medicine, that alcohol, that line of Coke, whatever it is. And that's how the addiction starts and gets going. And then, of course, we know it makes you unplug again. It doesn't last, that thing, but it starts to kind of get you to think about it. So that's why, people always say, that aren't addicts and that don't understand addiction. They say, they're just irresponsible and they're selfish and all this. No, they're not. They just want to feel normal and a part of things and plugged into themselves. That's how it all starts. And it's trauma related.
Wow. I'm sensing that part of this reaction to trauma, as you say, is that lack of ability to connect intimately with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own life, and actually quite a few people that I know, oddly enough, birds of a feather thing, I've been, I don't like to use clinical labels because then it's like, oh, I'm a this, but I would say my behavior has been that of what would be called a love avoidant in our current lexicon of psychology, right? Where I've loved and I've been loved, but only to a certain point.
Yeah.
Specifically in romantic relationships.
We used to call that attachment disorder.
Oh, okay.
Back in the old DSM.
Okay. So, and that's something that I've seen within myself, and I've seen how my capacity to connect, whether romantically or even in family and friendship relationships, just hasn't served me. And my heart started to open because of all the work that I'm doing. And now in life, I feel very much, a sense of fearlessness about just allowing my heart to be open, probably for the first time ever.
Good. Yeah.
Where
That's a big deal.
I don't feel any breaks. I mean, it's scary as fuck.
It is scary.
Don't get me wrong.
Because you feel vulnerable.
Yes, but I refuse to succumb to the fear as I have in the past and put up walls. And I'm also having a bit more wisdom and discernment about the people with whom I allow in, and not just like, cool, everyone come on in, and leave myself vulnerable in ignorance of where someone is on an energetic, conscious level, right?
Mm-hmm.
But fuck, I'm 48. You know what I mean? It's taken me a long time. And now as you're talking about this phenomenon or this process of trauma and that inability to connect, I see that within myself because perhaps in those formative years when I didn't have that discernment or there wasn't someone there to protect me or whatever the case was, that there was an invasion of my space and my, as I said, my innocence and autonomy, and just had no control over what was happening to me.
Exactly.
And so I can see how the control mechanism, the closed heart and that, seeming protection of the heart, which ultimately just hurts your heart, was the method by which I try to prevent that from happening anymore.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
It does. And you had, I would say like your approach before coming to Rythmia was like the best possible way you could do that. Like really being committed to like the things you were focusing on and having a lot of courage because it's not easy, right? And there's been scary moments as you did this sort of kind of connection with self thing. And you sought out great, programs and people to talk to. So that's like really cool. And that's a great way to do it. I'm all for that. But as we know, most people don't have access to that, or they just don't know how to do it, or they don't have the money to do it or whatever. And they're just, or even the desire, they're confused. So what I love about plant medicine is it's fast and you can boom, knock out stuff. Now, I always prefer that someone comes as you've come, that already worked on the trauma and already worked on as best they could, just different levels of resolve. Because then they're like, they know they have the trauma and they're here to work on it. If people show up, never worked on their trauma and it's severe, we can still deal with that. We do every week and we still have great results, but it's just a little rougher,
Dude, the sound in the ceremony room that I'm hearing all night, I hear the roughness.
Yeah, right.
It's called puke hitting a bucket.
Yeah.
Retching, screaming, crying. And I have had the sense, I don't, want to compare my experience with other people's experiences, but I have had the sense like, wow, I'm really grateful that this is not sort of my first foray into the shadow.
It's a big help.
Yeah, I've been working with the shadow elements of myself for a long time, and I think that made it easier for me to surrender and trust. And also, even though I haven't really directed what I want to work on, I've just trusted the intelligence of the plant or God or whatever it is, to show me what it feels needs to be worked on.
And that's totally cool. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and so I just like I said, the first couple nights, I don't know that I really worked on anything. I just had the experience of being as present as I've ever been in the truest sense. And then last night, the work started to begin, and these different, memories and things like that started to happen. But it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of pain or resistance, even though there were moments in which I was really grieving and experiencing some of the hurt that I've held and gone through. But it was like a pleasurable processing of it. It wasn't like, oh my God, don't look there. It's hurting me again. It's like, no, it's not hurting me again. I'm just actually letting go of the hurt.
Yeah, exactly. That's
so it's
beautiful.
Cool. But listening to some of the people in the room, I'm like, oh God, that's got to be rough,
They're going through it.
Like if you've never faced yourself or, been so fortunate as me to have an acute addiction that made me force myself and learn how to meditate and all that stuff. I was like, oh my God. And I had so much reverence for the people that were having that much more intense experience. There's one woman here that she's here with her daughter. And I said, how's your mom doing? Because she looked a little distraught one day. And she said, well, she's hanging in there. She's 77 years old. And I said, so she's never done any psychedelics? She said, no, my mom's never even smoked weed before. And she had the courage to come here and go through this.
We get that all the time.
Dude. And
we've had people in their 90s here.
Really?
Yeah, they've never done anything.
Oh my God.
And they love it. They do great.
We'll be right back at you after this brief but important announcement.
Yo, I am super pumped to share with you beekeepersnaturals.com. Now, if you heard episode 175 with founder and CEO Carly Stein, you know exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are the highest quality bee products in the world from Beekeepers Naturals. Now, I've been using bee products for a long time. Back in the 90s, I was rocking like the bee pollen and using kind of gourmet honey over the years and things like that. But until that interview, honestly, I had no idea of the superpowers and the variety of different bee products. So not only do these guys make the cleanest, most organic, most potent bee products, they also have the widest variety of products. So whether it's propolis, which helps you with the immune system, soothing scratchy throats, it's really potent stuff, or the bee pollen, which is a superfood with vitamins and nutrients and gives you energy. It has amino acids and protein, whether it's the raw honey, the royal jelly. They even have a tonic for your brain. I mean, they have a lot of great products over there. So if you're not hip to the power of bee products as a superfood, I want to highly recommend that you get over to beekeepersnaturals.com. And honestly, if you want to just learn all about bees in the industry and how it's done right for ecology and for the environment, definitely go back and listen to episode 175. It's a great episode, and the founder, Carly, is just brilliant, and she's running a really great operation over there. So I'm very happy to support them on the show. And like all the stuff I always talk about, I use them every day. In fact, I use it too much because I run out of it. Like when I interviewed her, I was like, so I do like a couple tablespoons of the bee powered, which is the really potent one that combines all of the superfoods in the hive into one product. She's like, dude, the dose for that is half a teaspoon once a day. You're tripping. But, I'm hardcore because it just tastes delicious and it gives you like instant energy. So definitely get over to beekeepersnaturals.com. When you're there, if you enter the code LIFESTYLIST, that's one word, LIFESTYLIST, you'll save 15% off your order. So go to beekeepersnaturals.com, enter the code LIFESTYLIST.
All right, folks, I'm about to bust out one of my secrets here. You ready for this? People often wonder how I'm able to record sometimes 3 or 4 podcasts in one day and stream them all on social media and do all of the crazy things I do. If you follow me on Instagram, my life is quite busy and somehow I managed to keep it together. Well, my secret weapon, or at least one of them, is the 4 Sigmatic Lion's Mane coffee. Now, I don't always have time to brew up some whole beans, put them in the French press, put the butter in there, do the whole thing, make myself that fatty kind of elixir. But what I do always have time for is to bust out one of the little Lion's Mane coffee packets from 4 Sigmatic, throw that in some hot water, even sometimes when I'm like in a rush and just need to make things happen, some cold water, shake it up, stir it up, blend it up, and I'm good to go. Now, what's cool about the Lion's Mane coffee is that it's an instant coffee, but it doesn't have any of the toxins of like your grandma's like Folgers instant coffee. By the way, don't ever eat that stuff. Super, super toxic. Instant coffees are generally really bad for you, but not this one. What's really cool about the 4 Sigmatic instant coffee is that you get like a balanced stimulation. So it's coffee without the jitters. The lion's mane sort of calms down the hit of caffeine. So that's why I really like this product. This has been used for a long time by Buddhist monks to help with focus during meditation. And this is just a beautiful mushroom and a modern day favorite for someone like me who likes to get creative, but also stay focused. And all of Four Sigmatic's mushrooms are dual extracted, meaning that you get the water soluble and fat soluble nutrients. And in non-geeky terms, that just means that they're really badass and that they do it right. So if you want to check it out, which I highly recommend you do, here's what's up. You go to foursigmatic.com/Luke Story. Again, that's foursigmatic.com/Luke Story. If you throw some of that lion's mane coffee in your shopping cart and then enter the code Luke Story, you're also going to save 15% off. That's foursigmatic.com/Luke Story. Your discount code is also Luke Story. Enjoy. And now back to the interview. The funny thing about this particular woman, I didn't get a report last night, but the daughter told me the first 2 nights she slept through the whole thing. And I thought, because I heard someone snoring it last night, I figured out it was her. I think she slept a bit last night, but I was having the realization that the medicine is intelligent enough. Whatever the energy is behind this thing, I don't try to figure it out. I just know there's something there. Knew that for her, that's how the work was going to be done.
That's right.
Not consciously, but as she's sleeping, her shit's being rewired, as you said. These parts of the brain being healed and the neurotransmitters being balanced and all of that is happening even though she has no cognitive experience of it.
Yeah, exactly. My first few ayahuasca ceremonies were like that. I just fell asleep.
No way.
Yeah. I was totally scared. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Yeah. But I was terrified. I had done Iboga a bunch. I was scared to do ayahuasca. Go figure. Maybe I have mom issues or something.
Right.
Which I love my mom. But so I fell asleep and it was still super cool because I don't know. I'm like, what happened? And like, I don't know, but I feel great. You know, it worked on me. It definitely does that.
How many ceremonies have you done at this point?
I've done close to 60. And I haven't done it in a while. I haven't done it in almost 2 years because I'm on call for all these ceremonies here. Every night.
Right.
So it'd be a little weird if the chief medical officer is up there drinking medicine and everybody's like, wait, isn't this the guy kind of supervising this place? It wouldn't be too cool. So, and by the way, I'm very rarely, if ever, needed up there.
Yeah.
Because everything's totally cool and the staff are awesome. There's a ton of people there.
Oh, the team of magicians and wizards in the ceremony is insane, especially last night. They're like a band too. All of a sudden, I was like, what is this music? Because you can't tell really where sound's coming from under the medicine.
Yeah.
And so I like leaned over and I was right in front. My mattress was right in front of the little shaman stand and where the medicine is served. And I leaned over. I was like, those are them? You know, everyone had gathered around with all their drums and guitars and they're chanting and singing. It was angelic. It was so beautiful.
Cool. Wait till tonight. It's even better.
Really?
There's a live band tonight, all Colombian style music.
No way.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it was, God, it was insane.
You know what I was going to say too about your like, when you were mentioning about like relationships and connecting and all that.
Yeah.
What I've been able to see in my career and mostly here, it's like, if we're not plugged into ourselves, we can't really plug into somebody else. It's kind of like it's forced, we can do it a little bit, but it's not true connection with other people. If I'm unplugged from myself, they're getting sort of a different version of who I really am because I'm not really open or authentic or being vulnerable. But if I'm plugged into myself, I can be vulnerable if I've resolved my fears and my traumas and whatever. And I can be cool with who I am. And that's where I can open up and I can connect and plug into people and they can do the same. So it's something that we see here all the time. We see people show up, they're like kind of loners and sort of rigid. And by the time they leave, every single person here is their friend. And they're in Facebook groups together and they come back for a reunion a year later. I mean, it completely changes the way people view social and just any sort of relationship with people. It's very, very cool. You know, it connects you.
That's interesting. So if you're someone who has processed your trauma by having limits on your capacity for intimacy and connection with other people, once that trauma is healed at a core soul level, then you lose the fear of being hurt again because you feel that sense of safety, security, and wholeness.
Exactly.
And therefore you can allow your heart to be open to someone and share your truth with them.
That's right.
Without feeling like you're going to fucking, like for me, it's like, I think in romantic relationships, there's just elements of myself. I'm like, I'm not talking about that. Like, I don't want them to know how fucked up I really am, or whatever, whatever quirks or shit that I have. It's like, oh, if they knew that, they would surely abandon me.
Yeah.
And I've become increasingly courageous about just being me and doing me, even in the podcast and social media and stuff. I mean, the past 2 years, I've given fewer fucks than I ever have in my life about what people think and all that. Because the people that abandon you aren't supposed to be there anyway. If they find out who you are, you're not a good match as a friend or otherwise. But still, at this point, still feel a little bit afraid to fully, let people in and really be seen.
I always tell people in that state when they're here, because they're all similar vibe. Like, I feel like I want to, but I'm still scared kind of thing. I said, okay, just go slow. Just test it. Test it with some people you already know. Just get closer to your buddy or your partner or your family, whatever. Test it like that and just build confidence in it. It's hard to go from 0 to 100 in one day, right? So you have the awareness now. You're plugged in. You feel safe. You know who you are. Now you can test it and just build confidence. And there's some behavioral component to that. Just to test it out. I always tell people that.
In terms of people that have had severe, mental issues and, clinically diagnosed with, bipolar and manic and all this kind of stuff. What type of turnarounds have you witnessed in your time working with plant medicine?
Incredible ones for depression, anxiety, PTSD, all the personality disorders, which are used to be called the Axis 2 disorders, like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic, all those. There's 13 of them. Now, bipolar is interesting because there's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 is, for various medical reasons, is pretty complicated with ayahuasca. But when somebody presents with this diagnosis, we can work with them and talk it through with them and kind of figure out stuff. And often those people are on psychotropic medication that they have to be off of. So if they're severe, back home, coming off their meds is not necessarily a great thing for them. And they have to really work with their doctor to see if that's even doable. And for some it is, and it has been. But what I love are the Axis 2, the old Axis 2 disorders, because the medical world believes that those are not curable. You cannot cure borderline personality disorder. It's who you are. It's called egocentric, meaning just who you are. It's part of you. You view the world differently than everybody else does. And you feel that, kicking that dog over there was justified because the dog needed a kick. Where everybody else would just be like, dude, are you nuts? The dog's harmless. What are you doing? But people with borderline and Axis 2 in particular have this belief. And that's a result of being completely unplugged from themselves emotionally in a way that's authentic with them, which is perfect for ayahuasca. It resolves it. So we've had a lot of people with borderline personality disorder come here. And in the West, and especially in LA, people that present with borderline get referred out. And nobody wants to deal with them.
Because they're so difficult?
They're so difficult. And the Board of Psychology in California recommends, if you're a clinician, don't have more than 2 in your practice.
Wow, damn.
Guess how many I had?
How many?
14.
Whoa.
Because I was good with them. Because I respected their process.
Right.
And respected them as people. And it was not easy. But I was already sort of in that zone to work with that particular disorder. So I would get all the referrals from all over LA of the borderline guests or people. And I would work with other clinicians that do dialectic behavioral therapy groups and stuff like that. So there was a bunch of people involved, but I was like the primary clinician for a lot of these people. What I've seen here with that particular disorder, quote unquote disorder, is a miracle. They report having none of the emotional deregulation that they reported on arriving. They've completely changed. And they're aware of who they are, and they're plugged in. and their symptoms go out the door. Now their behavior has to change. They have to actually put into practice the new vibe, right? And that's where, that's a challenge, but that's just life. I have new awareness. I got to use it now, but that emotional part of confusion and chaos that's leading me to kind of like be unplugged and unstable, that part's gone. It's incredible. Depression and anxiety are also really good to work here because that's about neurochemistry often. Dopamine, serotonin, out of balance. High serotonin, usually anxiety. Low dopamine, usually depression. Now, there's other reasons for it, for those disorders, but those are usually two things that are happening. And people don't know if they have low dopamine. The test for neurochemistry is a urine test, but it's like you'd have to do like a series of like 100 urine tests over like a week to really see actually what's going on. Because, neurochemistry is surging and retracting every millisecond. Right. So it's impossible to like know necessarily.
Oh, that's interesting. You can't really track a trend unless you're just continually monitoring. What would be interesting in the future, and I'm sure this is online somewhere to come, is where, you have like a blood glucose monitor. You can stick into your skin. I've done that. And you see the different things you eat and your behavior and how that affects your glucose levels.
And that's accurate, that particular thing.
Right. But imagine that for neurotransmitters. There's a little plug you put in the back of your head or something. You're like, oh shit, when I watched that horror movie, my dopamine tanked. Note to self, no more horror movies. I'm curious about the shit. I got to take a quick little break. Editor, give me 1 sec.
Yeah. No problem. You liking it? It's fun to talk about these things, Yeah, totally.
Most people can't get helped with this stuff.
Exactly.
And they work their whole fucking life.
They're caught in a revolving door.
Yeah, one thing after another, and on, and it never really, for many of us, gets completely resolved.
Yep, it's a tough one.
Okay, so editors, I'm back in now. You can plug us right back where I left off. Thank you. I want to get a little more information from you about what the medicine is actually doing to your brain. You mentioned, the repairing the amygdala, this and that. I want to get a little more sciencey on it.
Cool.
Because each night I've done it so far, I've had multiple experiences where there's this kind of energy or entity or something that is very kind of sci-fi and ET related. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. It probably sounds crazy, and people are like, I'm done with this podcast. This guy's fucking nuts. It just is what it is, dude. And
there's themes of that for lots of people.
And what I've heard that, and what I've experienced is like, I feel like my brain is being fixed and worked on. It's like I'm being scanned, and there's lights and all sorts of shit happening. And I'm just allowing it and saying, okay, do your thing. Like, fix my brain. It definitely needs it.
Yeah.
But I feel things moving in there and juices flowing. And it's like, whoa, something is happening in my brain. So, that's more on the esoteric end of it, where it's just this energetic thing. But what do we know scientifically that's verifiable that's actually happening under the influence?
So just to like preface that, it's like in vivo brain studies, right, are really difficult to do. So most brain studies, what we know mostly about the brain is done from cadaver work, and then that's not very helpful for like certain electrical processes and things that they're trying to figure out in the brain. So the brain is particularly difficult to study because of that. You don't want to cut somebody's head open and while they're alive and start messing with their brain. It's just too volatile, right? But there's been MRIs done when there's people on plant medicine and what it looks like and what the electrical charges are doing a little differently. And now the thing that I find the most fascinating is the DMT component. So DMT is produced naturally by every living thing in different quantities. So mammals have it, plants have it, people have it, we all have it, right? And what DMT is kind of unknown to science. They think, well, the pineal gland is something that's not very relevant, and it's kind of like through evolution, it's becoming less important, and now it's almost gone. It's kind of like some science's belief about the pineal gland. And DMT comes from the pineal gland. And what other scientists believe is that, there's always mixed opinions. They believe that molecule is our intuition and our connection to things. And if you ever kind of have this rendezvous, or what is it? Not rendezvous, what's that? You've been there before. You feel like you've been
Deja vu.
Deja vu.
Yeah.
So it's like that. And just kind of the whole vibe of like, I knew what you were going to say before you said it kind of thing. Like that whole sort of zone that we've all had before with things.
Yeah, or you're about to call someone or text someone, and instantly in that moment they text you, all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so everybody would just say, oh, it's just chance. But what's a lot of part of science believes is that's our ability to connect to energy fields and to other people's energy, and to kind of have intentions, things that are actually thoughts that can travel. And so there's all this kind of quantum physics stuff to this. But if DMT is that molecule that creates that naturally in us, right? And there's a high level of DMT when a person is dying, as they die. DMT floods the body when someone's just about to die. Forget plant medicine. It's just the body will kick that out. And that's what transports, in theory, right, the spirit or whatever.
Wow.
And helps them go peaceably, I guess is the best way to say that.
Yeah.
So if you're taking in an extra amount of DMT through ayahuasca, which is the active ingredient, you're going to have even more of a connection to things, to the universe, to energy fields, to yourself. And that whole thing about like getting healed and sort of like an operation happening. I don't know the answer to that, but I've had it happen to me. And most people that I know that come here have it happen to some degree. And I think it's two things potentially. I think one of it is that if I'm plugged into myself completely, I can heal my body. Like our bodies are the best healing mechanisms there are. Forget science and medicine and da-da-da. I can heal myself if I'm connected to myself. So that's one thing that's probably going on. But then there's this other thing that's hard to explain. Aliens or whatever, right? And I don't know what that's about. But I just know this. People that have those experiences report being healed afterwards. And they're not still sick with whatever they had. And that's what they're telling us, as we follow up with them 6 months, 9 months, 1 year later. They're still healed from whatever it is they're working on. It can be simple things too, like a rotator cuff, whatever. It can be anything. So the science behind, this plant medicine thing, right, is basically based in synaptic plasticity, which is the ability of the brain to morph and change. Back in the old school days of neurobiology, they thought the brain was rigid and it was just set in stone after a certain age. And there's nothing you can do. It doesn't change. That's been debunked. And we know the brain changes all the time. It builds new neuron pathways. One's branch off, one's fade. New electrical impulses can go down this path. Your brain can morph. And so that's what's going on with plant medicine. It's creating a synaptic plasticity moment, especially with that part of the amygdala, right? Where the neurochemistry is like. So basically what the amygdala has going on, there's these roads of neurons, and it's an event of pain or fear or scared or some messed up thing. And on that thing is an emotion firing too. There's emotion connected to that pathway, and it's firing and stuff. And so that's what's influencing our normal life. But if you can open up the barrier, the intellectual barrier between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex can basically look and go, oh, let's take this pathway and get that emotion out of it. And then we'll just move this pathway over here so that dogs aren't scary. Dogs are really cool, and I want one as a pet. I'll just shift it over here. And then dogs are loved, dogs are nice, dogs are sweet. Not the old way when I was a kid, got bit by one. Dogs are mean and I hate dogs and I'm scared. It changes. So there's a neuron pathway shift and new neurons building and connecting. And that's how the brain's adjusting during plant medicine. And that's basically how it's going on scientifically.
Dude, so that's what I'm feeling when I feel that.
Yes.
Like these fucking.
Yeah.
I can't, words are so weak when it comes to trying to describe these experiences. But Yeah, it's like I'm sitting there watching my brain get this sort of psychic surgery. And that it, based on what you said on the scientific basis, that must explain what's happening in there.
Correct.
It's so interesting. It's beyond fascinating that's even possible. In terms of the structure of the brain, so we have the amygdala, and say, you're a kid and, you get beaten or abused or whatever, then does the amygdala then get injured in a sense?
Not so much injured. It starts, it's like a database. It starts collecting data.
Okay.
These type of kids or this type of playground or this type of time of day is dangerous. It's for survival.
Okay, so here we go. You mentioned the dog thing.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot about this because I've healed my relationships with the canine.
Nice.
And now I have one,
Cool.
Cookie. She's amazing. She's my co-host normally when I'm recording at home. But as a kid, I was attacked by a German Shepherd. I have a big hole in my thigh.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, and big fucking German Shepherd. It took a chunk out of me. And then my dad used to have this stupid dog named Sister, who was like a herding dog, a sheep herding dog.
Those could be rough too.
He used to chase me up and down the driveway to the bus stop and just bite at me and nip at me. I didn't know it was trying to herd me. I thought it was trying to kill me. That went on for years.
Yeah.
And I probably have a little like grudge on my dad for not getting rid of the fucking dog. Like he chose the dog over me because he knew I was terrified. But to him, he's like, dude, it's not going to hurt you. Chill.
Yeah.
And then really one of the most spiritual experiences of my life was getting bit on the face by a Rottweiler.
Oh, wow. You've had all kinds of rough things with dogs.
Yeah. And it took, just like gripped my whole face in its mouth, a giant Rottweiler. I was drunk and being a dumbass and slapping it on the back. It didn't like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that eventually led to me getting $7,000 in a lawsuit, which led to me having enough money to buy all the heroin I could ever want, which led me to hitting the most horrific bottom ever, which led me to rehab. The dog helped me find God. So
wow.
The irony in that, dog God, right?
That's very cool. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful to those big mean dogs because in a weird sort of way, it led me to this moment right here, sitting with you and being on this journey of healing and spiritual exploration. That said, because I've had those experiences, so that was then registered in the amygdala, and my entire life up until, I still get a little bit, but when a dog is barking, I get this surge of adrenaline and cortisol. And I'm just like, I become flooded and pissed and annoyed or scared.
Yeah.
So when the amygdala is triggered by an experience or memory like that, what happens chemically? Is it the hypothalamus or what's the other one, the hippocampus?
Yeah, they're all involved.
Do those then get signaled to release all these hormones and shit to fucking make you run or hide? And
absolutely.
Is that how that works?
That's how that works. If you think about it, like bring it back to caveman times, if there's a freaking saber-toothed tiger chasing some dude, he's got to know that that's not going to work. And he has to run and hide and he's got adrenaline surging, right, to be able to survive. So that's what that is. It's like a primitive impulse and it's an instinctive thing that we have as human beings. Dogs were scaring you and biting you and trying to eat you. And you had that response. And that was for survival, right? So it got like burned into your brain, something to stay alive.
And so here we are later in life. And as I said, I'm not that triggered, but still it happens sometimes. It's just more annoyed. Like when a little yappy dog barks, including mine from time to time, it just irritates me. It's hard for me to just be chill with that. But I don't get as afraid as I once did. So
that's good.
So,
because what happens now, right, is like, let's say, even though you've already been cool with dogs, but let's say you weren't yet until you got here, let's say. So what would happen then on the plant medicine is that you would see like why you were scared of those dogs, because it all makes sense. One's biting you in the face, one's nipping at your ankles, and one's biting your leg off. So it all makes sense why you were scared. It's not a mystery. So you would see that's viable and okay. And then, but that's not your present day thing. So you can just like, so it just goes. It's like that. Well, I'm not slapping a Rottweiler on the back anymore. I'm not doing that. I'm not a little kid with a German Shepherd on me. Now I want to have a nice, fun dog, and the dogs are totally mean something nice to me now, and it just changes and shifts the way you feel about the whole event. And so you still have that memory. The memories are still there. It was scary, it wasn't cool, and that's okay. But as long as that memory isn't influencing you now, and it's not, because you've let it go, you've released it, right? So that's an analogy for all kinds of things. With relationships too. Like if you were abused and hurt and treated poorly, your whole developmental years, and now you're an adult and relationships are just suck because you picked the wrong people and they're abusive too, or they leave you or whatever. Of course, because that's your understanding of yourself and others, because it's burned in from that young age time. So now it's resolved, let's say, right? You've worked it through, and now you can do it. Now you can connect with people. Now you know that's just a person. And if they leave you, who cares? Like that's their freaking bad, right? It doesn't wound you mortally like it would when you were 5.
Right. And would you say with something like going back to the dog example and the triggering aftershocks of that, say one is in ceremony and they don't particularly in a cognitive sense touch on that trauma, and sort of like last night, there was a number of different experiences that I went back to and I allowed myself to work through them and recontextualize them and heal from them. But I was conscious that that was a topic that I was kind of working on, right? And so I'm hoping that, as you say, that I have the net effect of healing that and not having it be an issue anymore. But say in my experience over the past 3 nights that the dog thing didn't come up for me at all and that still was an issue.
Yeah.
Do things still get healed without you being taken, through your awareness to that event?
Yes. And the way they do that is you might hear some people the next day after a ceremony say, I'm really confused. Like I had all these weird nonsensical images or thoughts that were super chaotic and didn't make any sense. Or I saw these weird figures or whatever they say. And none of it was relevant to my mom or my parents or the things I wanted to work on. And then I just go, okay, how did you feel when you were having that sort of experience that night that was confusing? Well, I was angry because I wasn't getting like what I'm here for. And I was scared a lot because those weird things I saw was just bizarre. And I was, I didn't trust anybody here at Rythmia because I'm doing this and you guys don't know what you're doing. I said, sounds like your parents. Right. Funny. Angry, scared, and don't trust them. I'm like, that's what happened. You got what you wanted. But because of your own personality or because of your own openness or not or whatever, everybody's different. These things came up as representations of what your intentions are. And it's the emotional thing that's relevant. It's not always like what you see. I mean, it can be. If you see a snake like going, cool, that's a snake, but what does it represent emotionally, right? And that's where the healing is. And then they kind of go, oh, duh, and they feel it. And then they change their whole view. So we can definitely work on things without you having to have that sort of conscious awareness. Okay, well, now I like dogs because I saw the dog, and now it's not always as linear as that.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense because, as I said, in the first 2 nights, there was very little thought activity or words or talking to myself, to God, to the medicine. It was just, as I said, just having that experience. But it was during those experiences when I think I felt the most sensation of things being rewired. Yeah. Even though I was having no association to an event or a trauma. It was just like, okay, something's happening to me here. There's some sort of surgical, energetic procedure taking place, and I'm allowing it to take place with full willingness and permission. But then, last night there were very specific things that I was guided into to work on. So that's reassuring to know that is possible. God, there's we're probably about ready to wrap it up here. We could talk forever, huh?
Yeah, dude, this is awesome.
It's just it's deep. It's deep, it's there's so many things I've discovered in the spiritual realms and also in health. I'm really into physical health and having your vessel be strong and vibrant and have longevity and vitality so that you can do this kind of work. But this one here, I feel like is a Columbus moment for me. I'm going like, whoa, I just stumbled on something really, really effective and powerful. That's the sense I get. And, of course, I'm excited because I'm in the middle of it. We'll see how I process when I get home. And I'm assuming it will be profound as it seems now.
You have a good support network back home.
I do.
Which is key.
I do.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Some of these guys come from Sandusky, Ohio.
Right. Yeah. I've met a few people here and they're like, my whole family thinks I'm crazy. No one's done anything like this. I mean, my tribe back home, I think especially with my friends that are in recovery, no one gave me any shit or anything, but they're kind of like, whoa, dude, really? You're doing what?
Yeah.
And I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, I just,
perfect.
I really don't care what anyone thinks.
Yeah,
I know when I'm guided into something, but I've discovered things in the health realm that are revolutionary. You know, this device called the AMP coil that I've used quite a bit, and it heals Lyme disease. And I mean, it's like these things that I discover. There's something in your body called deuterium, which is this heavy hydrogen that destroys your ability to, or, you know, doesn't destroy, but lessens your ability to produce ATP because it breaks the nanomotors in your mitochondria. And it's in our food and in our water and environment. And once you hit a certain load of deuterium, your body loses the ability to deplete it naturally. And so I did like a 6-hour podcast just on that one thing.
Wow.
Cool. I went through the protocol, did it to myself, have an amazing abundance of energy now having done that.
That's awesome.
So, you know, I feel like, oh my God, this is like the best discovery to share with people. And that's kind of what this feels like. I feel very late to the party in a sense.
You're not at all. You're not late to the party. I'm telling you, this is just beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, I'm as enjoyable as most of the experiences have been, I really don't like the way I feel after.
No, of course. It's been a lot of work. You're exhausted.
Oh, dude. And I don't want to throw up, but kind of nauseous. And I feel almost like drunk. I can't really walk right. And I'm just like, God, I just want this to end now. And difficult to sleep a bit. Feel kind of amped, you know? And so it's funny because with drugs that just have a net effect of euphoria, typically, historically, I've been like, oh, I can't wait to do that shit again. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and do more. This is kind of like, oh, do I want to do that again?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, every time I walk up the hill to the room, I'm like, oh God,
here we go.
Am I going to puke? You know? And, but then when I'm in it, I'm thinking, how deep is this well? Like, how many times am I going to explore this? And how many is necessary to reach the point where I feel healed enough, you know?
We did Jerry tell you his philosophy, our philosophy about that?
No.
We believe, like, so we have these 3 intentions that we kind of say, if you do these 3 while you're here, you'll get everything that you're asking for, right? Sure. Which is, show me who I become, reunite me with my soul, and heal my heart. And we believe those are 3 kind of catch-all intentions. And when people do that, then they got what's called their miracle, meaning they got their result that they wanted, their goal. And our belief is that you can do that 3 times, 3, 3, 3 in your life, you know? And so that would be what, like 9 ceremonies if you got 1 each one? Or like, let's say you do the whole 3 in a week. So that's like 4, 4, 4, whatever, you know, but you can do that deeper thing 3 times and then you're good. Then you're set, you know? And some people get everything they need with 1 ceremony. You know, we've seen that too. But there's always, like you said, there's always these deeper levels, right? And there's this deeper thing. So it just really depends on the person, I believe. But what we've been told and what we've seen in our own kind of having 4,000 people plus come through here, working with these shaman and stuff, is that it's 9 times, like 3, 3, 3, 9 of these intentions.
So... meaning like 3 times the 4 ceremony block?
Yeah, that's a better way to say it. Yes. So let's say if you're here for a week and you have those 3 intentions and you got all 3.
Yeah.
You can do that again 2 more times.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. 3 rounds. Yeah. It's the kind of thing like I sort of don't look forward to doing it again. Of course. You know, it's just like, oh, it's God. Brutal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not even, like I said, some people in there are having a rough time. I'm laughing my ass off. I'm crying. I'm laughing. I'm good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, whoa, man, I hope I don't have to do this too many times to get what I, desire.
That's the thing. Like if you look at the Western medical model, the therapeutic model, it's like, okay, let's go. It's slow. And it's like kind of just working on things slow. And it's usually, okay, I can do that. But you hear it's a week. It's 20 years of therapy in a week. So there's a lot going on. And it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's work. It's hardcore work.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. I'm so curious to see how this is going to unfold and how it'll integrate, because one thing I noticed, which is funny, I don't know when this occurred to me, maybe yesterday, since I've been here, I haven't bitten my fingernails.
Yeah, well, that's anxiety usually.
Yeah.
Right? So you're just releasing all that kind of stuff.
As soon as I quit smoking a number of years ago, I used to bite my nails as a kid, just chronically to like bled, you know? And, but then when I smoked, I don't bite my fingernails. And then every time I quit smoking, I start biting my fingernails. It's always one or the other, you know, just some sort of manual, habitual thing. But yesterday I was like, weird. I haven't been picking my nails, you know, I'm always like picking at them and this nervous energy.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see that. So I'm wondering, what other habitual coping mechanisms are going to fall away, albeit, you know, that's a subtle one, but
sure.
I'm sure there's a multitude of ways in which I'm avoiding feeling or avoiding an uncomfortable state of experience.
For sure.
So, wow, dude. Well, I think that just, you know, there's no way to wrap it up, but I think that's a good kind of ending point. I think we've covered
I think so.
what my heart desired to cover here. And I appreciate your expertise and your point of view and the fact that we really got to dig into the addiction piece and the mental health piece because, man, that's the stuff I see people really suffer from.
Yeah, me too.
And, you know, like I said, just about everyone I know has had some degree of trauma. Yep. And I'm resisting the temptation to like message all my friends, sign up, you got to come here, you got to come here. You know, I'm like, I don't want to play God or proselytize. If someone asks me, cool, I'll share and say, you know, I was thinking, because I've thought about so many people in ceremony.
Of course.
Oh man, God, if I could just, I mean, people I haven't talked to for years and I just see their pattern that we've been discussing and go, oh my God, they have no idea that there's a possibility to heal that. You know,
they don't know.
People that even haven't done any work or people that have tried everything and they're still not really fundamentally changed.
Exactly. Your vibe alone will be communication enough to the people that you know. They'll just sense it.
Now, it's interesting. A few people here have said to me, actually every day since the first ceremony, oh my God, you look so different. Your vibe was like kind of, and I was, you know, I almost took offense a little. They were like, your vibe was kind of dark. And and I was like, what? I'm Mr. Love. What are you talking about?
I'll tell you what it was, dude. It wasn't dark. It was, I'm speculating because I didn't see you when you first got here. It's just coming from LA, man. It's freaking hardcore there, dude.
Yeah, it is.
The smog, the traffic, the rat race vibe that, you know, you're not necessarily in that rat race vibe, but you're around it all the time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really, I'm from LA, so I love LA, right? But it's a rough place because there's just a lot of people there. And you just had that on your countenance.
Right.
Just that stress or whatever it was. And that's probably what they're talking about, not being dark.
I mean, I was just, you know, I was like, okay, I think this is, it's like a backhanded compliment. You look like such a dick the first day, and now I kind of like you, you know? That's the way my brain heard it. But also, a couple of people that said that to me, we met at the airport when I landed, and there was a traffic jam. And so the driver from here that was driving the shuttle was considerably late. And so I arrived. I didn't know, I thought I was the only guy going to Rythmia. My phone doesn't work. I mean, I didn't panic, but it definitely wasn't an ideal scenario.
Of course.
I breathed through it and, you know, it'll work out. It's fine. But after a long flight, it's a bit annoying.
Big time.
And so I met there was 4 people coming here also that night. And I was like, what the fuck? Where's the driver? You know, so no wonder they kind of perceived me as being a bit uptight in that context. So yeah, probably a number of different things. But anyway, dude.
We see everybody shift here.
Yeah.
It's incredible place to work, man.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. So I have a feeling you're probably going to stick around here a bit and keep doing what you're doing, huh?
I can't go back to the old way.
Right. Can you imagine sitting and like doing talk therapy with someone for 20 years?
No way.
I mean, look at Jerry.
Do that again.
He worked with his ass for years. He couldn't even get sober, let alone have a change of character, you know?
The tools of my practice or my whatever career are not good for the people I work with.
Got it. So yeah, I like that. It's a great way to state it. It might be good for others and others might.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not to write it off.
Of course. Yeah. And a lot of people benefit greatly from talk therapy. And I've had some people also benefit, but this works. And this is my vibe now. And this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
I find talk therapy handy, not so much to like do the deep work, but if I'm just perplexed by something to get, to get another point of view.
Yeah, it is good for that.
There's a conflict in business or relationships. Say, hey man, here's what's going on. Okay, they did this. I said this. We got to do this. What do you think? And have someone go, oh, hey, did you look at it from this perspective?
It is good for that.
You know, that objectivity that comes with speaking with someone about the issues in your life.
Yeah.
And having them be able to have more clarity than you do because they're not emotionally involved in the outcome. And, they're not triggered by the shit you're triggered by in that moment.
Exactly. And it is good for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, but definitely I've not found a lot of lasting major transformation like I have the feeling that I'm getting here. So thank you so much for doing the work you do. Thank you for sharing, your wisdom and experience with us. One thing I like to ask each and every guest, I think I've gotten every one out of a couple hundred now, is who have been 3 teachers or teachings in your life that have influenced you, your work, your evolution, that you might be able to share with the audience for them to go research and explore?
Well, it's going to be very unorthodox, but I tell you right now.
They always are, dude. You'd be surprised.
Henry Rollins.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Yeah. LA guy, old Black Flag.
That's right.
Fan. Yes.
Ice-T.
Dude, okay.
And the reason for Ice-T is because I went to a lecture of his when I was in college, and he said, "Don't fight the system, you dumb white males. If you don't like the system, get up into the highest ranks of the system and go off like a time bomb and then change the program." I was like, oh, you're right. So that's what I did.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And the third one?
Definitely 2 curveballs so far. Loving it. Who's the third?
Malcolm X. Malcolm X. I used to, when I was in high school, I would every summer, because I was a surfer nerd, I would go to the library and get as many books as I could find on one subject that I was interested in for the summer. And one summer was Malcolm X. And I read every book I could find about Malcolm X. And I fell in love with the guy, about his philosophy. Not necessarily like the black-white thing, but it's more about like just his focus and how he wanted to empower people and how he changed his belief system that was very rigid. And he shifted. He had 3 major shifts in his life, from being kind of like an inmate con guy to being like a Nation of Islam guy, then to being like a free thinking kind of on his own guy. And those are huge transitions. And I really respect that, about how he did that. So that was just inspiring to me. So those are the 3: Henry Rollins, Ice-T, and Malcolm X.
And why Henry Rollins?
Because when I was 14 years old, I went to Perkins Palace in Pasadena, and I had a skateboard there because my mom and dad wouldn't drive me because they didn't want me to go. I skateboarded to Perkins Palace in Pasadena and saw Black Flag, and I was 14. And it changed my life because of what he would talk about in between songs, and about fighting oppression and the system that was existing with Ronald Reagan in there and all this crazy nonsense. And it just like completely showed me what punk rock was about. It wasn't about being stupid and nihilistic and the drug thing. It was about changing what was going on in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool, man. That's great. 3 great ones. Now I'm very curious about Malcolm X. I don't know much about his life. I'll have to do a bit of research. So
cool.
I'm going to take your suggestions too and follow up on those.
All right.
Do you have any personal social media or website or anything you want to give a shout out? Obviously, I'm going to send people to Rythmia throughout this whole series.
Sure.
But,
we just have, I just use the Rythmia Facebook page for my Facebook Lives. I do them every Monday night at 7 p.m. Costa Rica time, which is Central Standard Time. It's like a quick little 10-minute little thing I do. And then we have an Instagram account, Rythmia Instagram, but most of our stuff's on Facebook. And we have a website, Rythmia Life Advancement Center. So
cool.
Easy to find on the web.
Cool. Dude, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. That concludes our 4th and final interview of this 2-part series on my ayahuasca experience. Big ups to Jeff. Without him, the experience would not have been the same for me. It was really important to create some context around mental health issues, addiction recovery, etc., as they relate from a scientific and clinical point of view to plant medicines and healing trauma using them. So this was a really important conversation and also a really fun one. So Jeff, if you ever listen to this, thank you so much, man. You were one of the highlights of my trip. What's going to happen now? Trip, no pun intended, get it? So many trips. In fact, what's going to happen now, my friends, is we're going to do a couple more field reports and we're going to take this thing home. So what you can hear from this point on are some narration that I did about the 3rd and 4th ceremony, a report on a bad accident that happened on my last day and how I managed to escape from that relatively unscathed and how the plant medicines actually helped me to deal with that trauma in real time. Then I do a report from the plane flying home from Costa Rica to Los Angeles. And then finally, I'll do a little summary recap as to where I stand today, a couple months later, And I want to encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 if you missed that. I mean, if you just randomly fell on part 2 here and you made it through to the end, congratulations. There must have been something interesting here for you. But if you really want the whole story, obviously go back and hear part 1, because without that, you're really not getting the full picture. So now I'd like to take you back to the hot, sweaty jungles of Costa Rica, where I do my 3rd and 4th ceremony reports and take us out to the end of this fantastic journey. Tonight is the night of ceremony number 4, T-minus 60 minutes until liftoff. And tonight's the night where we go deep, as if we weren't going deep the 3 other nights. So per usual, I have a little bit of nervous excitement, but I'm really looking forward to the experience tonight, because based on everyone who's been through this particular night, which is the Thursday night in the week at Rythmia, they say that it's absolutely just earth-shattering and beautiful and quite intense, while the other nights typically run from about 5:30 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. Tonight's ceremony goes from 7:30 p.m. until approximately 8:30 or 9 a.m. tomorrow. And then tomorrow we've got breathwork and all sorts of other stuff to sort of seal the deal, so to speak. So, I'm sitting in my room. I'm about to meditate and just really get myself rested for the evening ahead. In reflection on last night, there's a couple key takeaways that I think would be worth exploring in this interlude. A few of them I discussed actually with Jeff, the medical director that I interviewed earlier today. I actually had 2 interviews, one at the godforsaken hour of 9 a.m. and another one at 10 a.m. And so I got those out of the way, but I didn't really feel I was able to process the full experience last night until about now. However, when I interviewed Jeff, I did talk about really going into some of the deep trauma in my life and observing the pain and trauma in so many people that I've loved and been in relationship with in my life, and just see how so many people are hurt. So I don't want to repeat that part of the experience, as it was relevant to that interview and that conversation, which of course came before this, seeing how these tracks are going to end up, I believe, in chronological order by the time I put all of this content together. That said, last night's experience was much different in that the first serving absolutely just knocked me on my ass in the best sense, and I had much more of a visceral experience last night, in that I had many more awarenesses and many journeys that I was taken on as I sort of surrendered to the process and the medicine, and I just kept asking it to take me where it wanted to take me next in terms of memories and things that I needed to process and work on. And there were a lot more words involved last night, messages delivered to me. I was asking questions of God, of the medicine, that I wanted answers to. While it wasn't that self-directed, I kept being led sort of into different areas of my life and examining, as I said, relationships. But one of the big experiences that I had last night, which was very cathartic and healing, and was the first experience in which I actually emoted and really cried. The other nights I've just yawned a lot and laughed a lot, and felt a little bit nauseous here and there. But last night, I had some real deep work going on, and what really brought it on was a moment in which, similar to the first 2 nights, where the mind was just completely gone and silent, and there was just empty space, and my consciousness was just resting within that space. And I was very aware of the fact that the mind had subsided and receded, and it was just allowing my soul, my spirit, to just be within the context of that dimension that's created or allowed by this particular medicine. It's an astonishing experience, to say the least, and really hard to put into words. But anyway, in that moment, I realized, this is no mind. You hear that expression in spirituality and in Buddhism, for example, no mind. And I asked the question in that moment, is this no mind? And then what came back to me was, no, this is no mind, as in K-N-W. Wait, K-N-O-W, no, like know the mind, right? And then I was reflecting back on a amazing teacher that I had for many years that just really saved my ass. Probably saved my life at a time in my late 20s through part of my 30s. And he used to tell me, Luke, you got to see your mind. You got to watch your mind. And I thought, oh, know the mind. Okay, there we go. And then I had the awareness that it wasn't about knowing the mind as an objective thing apart from me and knowing how it operates and understanding it so much as knowing it as in getting to know it. And in that realization, I became aware that I really needed to introduce myself to my mind, and that it was a part of me, and it was a necessary part of me, and a part of me for which I'm extremely grateful, and allows me to do things like do this recording right now and communicate my experiences to people and serve in the way that I do in the world, and so many other things like tying my shoes and knowing when it's time to go to the bathroom and all of the things that the mind just does, and how it runs your nervous system and all the miraculous things that the brain and the mind does. But this is more in the ethereal sense, the ethereal mind, more so than like the actual brain, but that universal mind. And so realizing that I needed to get to know my mind within those few moments, however long it was. It felt like 10 hours. It was probably 10 minutes that this took place in. But I really got to know my mind and introduced myself and welcomed it and thanked it and merged with the mind, where my soul could actually interface with the mind, so it's not one or the other, and so that the mind was not demonized and all of this, etc. So as I got to know mind, which was also incredible because it was also no mind. There was no mind, but at the same time, these awarenesses were happening to me and for me. And after that sort of subsided, I was naturally guided to experience the same thing with my heart and to get to know my heart and make peace with it and communicate with it and make amends to it for, I made amends to my mind too for all the damage I've done to it by wrong thinking and all the chemical abuse that I've put my actual brain through and my mind through and all of the emotional trauma that I've brought upon myself really mentally. And also the pain that I've caused my own heart and the pain that others have caused my heart. And also the pain that I've caused others' hearts. And so there was a real peace made with my heart. And then I had the sense that I wanted to communicate to my heart that I was going to protect it, And then I realized that my whole life I've been trying to protect my heart by concealing it and hiding it. And that the real protection of the heart is to allow the heart to be free and allow it to be expressed, and to know that I can trust myself enough to take care of my heart by allowing it space to be fully operational and to fully be seen. And part of my doing this recording, sitting in my room right now, holding the recorder in front of my face, talking to what will be a future podcast audience, is part of that expression, and not being afraid to share what I'm going through and sharing the healing of this experience and the experiences that I'm sure are to follow in different modalities and different practices to come for the rest of my life. And so apart from the process that I discussed in the interview earlier with Jeff, this was the big moment, and there's a lot of crying, a lot of emoting during this period, but I really felt it was important to just welcome the mind, to welcome my heart, and to fully integrate with them, and to have them be part of that soul experience, to allow them to interface with my consciousness, and to have them be fully operational in my life moving forward and in this moment right now. So, of course, there was much more to it. I'm sure at some point I'm going to do kind of a summary of the different journeys, ceremonies, and relay in more of a summarized way what this experience has been like. But while it's still fresh in my awareness, I think it's important to do these little reports and just kind of reflect, because listen, man, I'm going to want to listen back to this after some time probably, and use this as a means by which to fully integrate this process into my life, because some of it goes away. I took some notes here and there. I have my little notebook here, and there are moments in which I had epiphanies, and I did stop to write them down kind of in the dark, hoping that I'd be able to read them the next day. So far, I'm doing pretty well reading my darkness handwriting. But this is part of the process for me too, is sharing this with you, the listener, and hoping to inspire other people that might feel the call, as I have recently, to explore this part of humanity, this this indigenous shaman medicine, this jungle juice, man. It's incredible stuff. And with that, I think I'll sign off and get my Vedic meditation in. I'm mixing, so many different continental traditions here on this trip between breath work and meditation and the plant medicine and all of this this fully integrative experience. There's so many different modalities involved in processing this medicine. So here I go. I've got a few minutes to sort of mentally and emotionally prepare myself and just summon up the bravery and courage needed to explore this part of my human experience and of reality. So until we meet again, I'm signing off. Well, made it through the fourth and final night of the ayahuasca ceremonies. And last night was an interesting one. The whole time I've been here, everyone's saying, man, just wait for Thursday night. It's so incredible. And so I didn't want to build up expectations, but I was expecting something quite miraculous. And after the first 3 nights and all the breakthroughs that I had and just how profound each night was in its own unique way, as I've described to some degree during these reports and these transmissions here, last night, it was a longer ceremony. It started at 7:30 p.m. and went till about 8 a.m. And we took a little bit different medicine last night. It was a version of ayahuasca referred to as yahe. And as I understand it, the difference last night was this brew was made from a different vine, which grows in Colombia. And it was done in the Colombian shamanic tradition. And so it was much thicker and actually tasted like, how would I describe it? Maybe like fermented sludge from the bottom of a porta potty that's been sitting out in the sun for 10 years. It was not a pleasant flavor profile. But that said, I went and took my first cup and laid down and felt quite ill. I still didn't throw up. I'm 4 for 4 on no throwing up. Many people did. It's part of the purging process. It's healthy, and it's some of what the medicine is designed to do. I was thrilled that I didn't throw up. However, I was having some explosive purging happening in the other direction for quite a few hours, which was no party. But I'm willing to detox, I'm willing to cleanse, I'm willing to get whatever physically or energetically needs to get out. But the first cup, I did not have any discernible psychoactive or hallucinatory visions or anything like that. I did have one brief vision or realization, and that was I was taken into a hallway and a door, and I opened the door, and there I was being born in this hospital room. And, it's sort of blurry. It's not like vivid, but I got the sense that that's what was going on. And then the nurses took my little bloody baby Luke body and for a moment set it on my mom's chest, and she kind of held me and was crying, and then they whisked me away after a couple moments and took me in another room and threw me in an incubator. And I got the sense that I was sort of abandoned or separated from my mom. And that was really interesting. I actually sent my mom a text today. I haven't heard back from her. She's not that big on her cell phone, and I was kind of incapacitated in terms of calling and have a conversation. But I'm really curious to hear from her if that is in fact what happened, because I really don't know. It would be interesting to find out if the stories lined up. But I had that, and that was a little bit of a healing, whether or not that's exactly what happened. There was definitely something around my birth that needed to be processed. But really, other than that, I kind of just laid there for hours and hours and listened to the music and had the first cup. And then when I went up for the second cup, I was like, God, I hope something happens, because I just felt pretty ill, but didn't really have anything euphoric happening or anything like that. And I actually just wanted to do more internal work. I was ready for more revelatory experiences, and took the second dose of medicine. And again, didn't really feel anything other than just getting increasingly ill. And this is the experience that a lot of people report when taking various plant medicines, including ayahuasca. It just wasn't my experience the first 3 nights. So I felt like, I don't know, hopefully not in a prideful sense, but I thought, fuck, I've been doing a lot of work for a lot of years, and maybe this experience is not negative for me like it has been seemingly for so many other people, just in terms of the purging and people processing negative emotions and pain and trauma and crying and those things that you hear going on in the ceremony while you're laying on your little mat. And so I kind of thought, cool, man, I'm just going to have 4 beautiful experiences. And last night it was quite challenging. I really had to work with my level of surrender and not finding fault or fighting the experience, and just, again, trusting that I was being given what I needed to be given, and understanding that there's an intelligence in these processes, and that the medicine gets in you and it has your highest good in mind, in a sense, and that it's following your intention and it's sharing that intention, which, overall my intention here is just to heal and to evolve more spiritually. And so I guess in retrospect, it's now 11 p.m. the next night, after having a busy day and resting and finally getting to eat a lot of food. I got dinner tonight, which I haven't had yet, which was a real treat. You don't eat before you go in ceremony. And those were every night at 5:30, with the exception of last night being 7:30. So, here I am. I just got all my files uploaded, for the podcast that I'll be producing, that you're now listening to, and made sure everything's in Dropbox and did all that kind of linear groundwork so I can get back in the process tomorrow. But as I reflect on it, I don't see last night as a negative experience. It's just God, it was just a lot of work to get through it. And there was also a healing in the middle of it, where all of the, the different shaman and light workers that were assisting with the ceremony put us all in a circle and did this really heavy-duty shamanic healing on us with all these tribal drums and music. And it was like you were in the middle of the jungle. There was some serious voodoo going on there, in the most positive sense, good love voodoo. But, just the smells of some of the elixirs and things that they use to cleanse you are really overwhelming and not pleasurable to me at all. Other people that I talk to said they really like the smell of these different, I don't even know what they call them, porte, I think they call it. It's just like these sort of strange jungle juice sauces that they spray on you and whack you with these Amazonian plants and all this stuff, which I believe is definitely very healing, and it's a cool process to experience. But because I was so nauseous, the smell of these things all night long, because it was just, nonstop, it was intense. So that's my report, of the final night. And I'm still maintaining, of course, that this has been and will continue to be a very healing, very transformative process. And I have a feeling it's one of those things that's going to really unfold within the next couple of weeks as I get home and reintegrate back into city life and work, and kind of, get back into my householder's spiritual path, which means I'll be operational in the world and being a real normal person and not living out in the jungle and doing the stuff I've been doing. So it's kind of hard to tell yet, but of course I'll be reporting back. But that's the report for today. And another thing that really kind of helped seal the deal for me was I got to do Christian's breathwork class tonight, which was fantastic. We did this deep, transformative breath for, the whole thing took an hour, but it was 45 minutes of this breathing, and it was quite cathartic and emotional and really intense. And that put me back into the positive sensations of this whole experience, and sort of activated the lighter side of the medicine for me, and also in a strange way really tied in so many of the Kundalini yoga experiences I've had. Because when you do a lot of the breath work in Kundalini yoga, you're really shaking up your energy. And some of the kriyas that involve long, extended periods of breath work produce DMT in your body, which is one of the active ingredients in ayahuasca. And so there's a familiarity to the plant medicine and the lineage of Kundalini yoga, even though they obviously come from completely different cultures across different continents, and different indigenous peoples of those continents and countries, of course, have come up with these different modalities, but in the end, the goal of them all is the same, and that's to merge with your higher self and change your energy and uplift your vibration and to evolve. And so today, doing the breath work, I just had the realization, wow, I've really been preparing for this plant medicine experience with the Kundalini yoga and all of the Vedic meditation, all the different things that I do, even going in float tanks and having that sensory deprivation experience, which is very much akin to being floored by ayahuasca and just laying there and having your consciousness sort of roam around these other dimensions and whatnot. So I've experienced a bit of the plant medicine before ever having done it, in a sense, and even to a degree when I was younger doing LSD and mushrooms and things like that, tapping into those other realms of reality, which are all around us all the time. And sometimes it takes something outside of yourself to give you keys to the portal of what's truly inside yourself, which is, that dimension of soul and spirit. So as I end the day today, I will just say that I'm able to see how all of the different practices that I've used over the years, all the different modalities, are now coming together in the most beautiful way. And I'm starting already to begin to integrate this experience into past experiences that I've had, and contemplating how I can continue to build on what I've discovered here. So as I end this night, I'll be getting up tomorrow and having a bit of a lounge day, perhaps go to the beach and take a steam and do a mud bath, do some yoga, and then our last breathwork session is tomorrow night, and then tomorrow night's the last night, and Sunday I hop on a plane at 11 a.m. and I'm flying back to LA and getting ready to move into a new house this week. So there's a lot going on, and it's just been an absolutely fantastic experience, and I'll definitely make sure to do a couple more reports as I let this soak in. And I think for now, my friends, my ass is going to go to bed. And thank you for joining me so far on this magical, illustrious, enlightening journey. Well, here we are on the last day of my time at Rythmia. And I had to do a report because I just had the most surreal experience. We had the day off today. The only, there's some classes and things like that. And then there's a breathwork class coming up in a bit, but there were no required classes and certainly no more plant ceremonies happening. So I thought, wow, I'd love to get out to the beach. And so I was speaking to a friend of mine who's also a participant, and he's from Costa Rica. And so he invited me and a few other people to go down to a really nice sort of secluded beach nearby. And he has his car here, because he drove. So I'm really excited. I get all my stuff ready. There's, 4 of us packed in this little car, and we head out of the driveway. I send a text to a friend of mine, and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm really feeling very grounded and just centered and connected and excited to go into this little beach. And then later on, we were set to go into town and have some dinner. And I thought, cool, I'm going to see some Costa Rica, having not seen much of it here, being dedicated to my time at Rythmia on the property here on the campus. So we get in the car, we pass the gates, everyone's kind of excited and talking, and our driver, who will remain unnamed because he would perhaps be mortified if I called him out on his error in driving. But anyway, we're going down the road, and he starts leaning back and talking to the people kind of in the back seat. I'm riding shotgun, I've got my seatbelt on, and then he starts veering toward the side of the road. I'm like, dude, yo. And by then it was too late, and he went off the side of the road, and the car tips over on my side, on the side of the car, and then there we are, flipped upside down. The windows pop out, and I'm looking at a bloody foot and people screaming, and I managed to unlatch my seatbelt, kind of fall to my side, and then pry the door open and get out and grab my bag that was kind of under me, and my cell phone had fallen. And thankfully I grabbed those and then just kind of set that aside and started helping the other people climb out. And, people were pretty shaken up. I don't think anyone was critically injured. There were some scrapes and cuts, and I think people got banged around a little bit. But it was so interesting. And having that experience, this was about an hour ago, having that experience, it was really interesting because once I climbed out of the car and, realized that I was not terribly injured, at least that I'm aware of so far, and that everyone else, although they were crying and pretty shaken up, were okay too, I just I felt instantly at peace, almost to the point where I kind of felt guilty that I wasn't more upset when some of the other people were. But it enabled me the opportunity to see that even though when I was 16 years old, I had a very similar accident driving my girlfriend at the time's car in Colorado, literally just going down a gravel road, not very fast, and started hydroplaning across what was called, it's called washboard. It's kind of something that happens to gravel roads. And your car will just kind of skid perpendicular to the road and you lose control no matter what you do with the steering wheel and which direction you attempt to turn the car. And we had gone off the road just like that and flipped over. And I was hanging upside down in that car at 16 years old. So I had kind of a visceral traumatic experience. I wasn't hurt the first time either, but no one likes to be thrown upside down off the side of the road, you know what I'm saying? So it was interesting to see that I didn't have any sort of trauma trigger, and more than anything, aside from just feeling badly for the people that were afraid and had a little blood happening and all that, I was just kind of like, shit, I wanted to go to the beach. I was kind of more bummed that happened because I had to come back to the medical clinic. And at Rythmia, I mean, they have a full-on medical clinic, nurses, doctors on call, all the time. So, we were in very, very good hands, needless to say. So I wasn't worried about being stranded in the jungle with a bunch of hippies. I mean, this is a legitimate medical facility. So that was fine. But it was just interesting that I wasn't really shaken up. I didn't, other than the fact that I missed a couple hours of beach time. It's kind of like no big deal. But just to be on the safe side, I came back to my room where I sit now and decided to meditate. And then I got a call from a friend who was going through a hard time, and we talked through some stuff that she was going through, and I had a great talk. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to run out to the beach. But before I do, I'm going to give a little daily report, and then I'm going to meditate just to make sure that I cleanse any trauma that I might not be aware of, internal emotional trauma, and really settle into that. I'm sitting on my biomat here, which is just great for any kind of physical pain. And I'm going to run a session when I meditate on my circadia, which is really great for anxiety and depression and sleep and things like that. I travel with it. And, I'm just going to do a little biohacking here and then do what I intended to do, get my ass down to the beach and go do some sun gazing and watch the sunset. But I wanted to give this report and just reiterate something that I talk about a lot, and that is so much of the discomfort and pain we experience is based on our mental reaction to it. And had my mind slipped into a negative space and been upset at the driver, or, dipped into fear for my own safety or fear for other people's safety, it would have been a much more traumatic experience and probably really, really ruined my day, if not my trip. I mean, here we are at the end of the trip. Everyone's celebrating this hard spiritual work that we've done. And, to get in a car crash was not on the itinerary. But I'm living proof that if one can really manage one's thoughts and attitude, that any experience can end up being a positive experience. So it's been a great day despite a little accident, a little being upside down momentarily and having a kind of smashed and bloody foot. I'm going to meditate and get my ass to the beach and watch that beautiful sunset, and then come back and have my final night at Rythmia. So stay tuned for my next report. And thanks as always for tuning in. It's now the 7th and final day of the trip to Costa Rica. I'm on the airplane, as you might be able to guess from the insane amount of background noise. But I got to say, this has been quite an incredible trip. I'll check in again once I land, but I did want to report something that was interesting in regard to my last transmission. And that is that on the 4th night of ceremony, when I had that vision about imagining my birth and having the medicine go back and heal that experience, and I had sent a text to my mom asking her if the way that I had been shown that my birth had happened was in fact reality. And last night she sent me a text that confirmed the exact sequence of events that I saw in that vision, which were, of course, walking through the door, seeing myself being born, having my mom hold me for just a couple of moments, and then being ushered off into another room and kept in an incubator and away from human touch. And she said that's exactly what happened. The only difference in the story was that she said I was held in a blanket on her chest for a couple minutes. And in my vision, I was just like bare. So minor variation in the story there. And then in my vision, there was no introduction to my dad, which she had indicated. She said that they took me out and showed me to my dad, who I guess was in the hallway or outside in the waiting room. And then they took me in the incubator, and she wasn't allowed to touch me for a couple days because there was a risk of infection due to the fact that they didn't know when her water had broken. So very interesting healing going on with that. It's strange when you don't know the facts surrounding an incident in your life, and in the process of an ayahuasca ceremony, you're shown things that you didn't know that you knew. Not a big deal, and it was a very short glimpse of a vision on that fourth and brutal night. But it sure is interesting to have someone not involved in this process reflect back to me a version of the story that corresponds with what I was given in ceremony. So after waking up from a long nap on the flight here, I think I'm capable of opening up my laptop finally and getting a little work done. And I will leave you with that little tidbit of reality until I check in again. What a long, strange trip it's been. So that concludes my final field report from the airplane, guys. And here I am sitting in my house in Laurel Canyon that I moved into right when I came back. I'd like to do a brief summary of the experience here. Of course, it's difficult to put everything that happened into words. So I think if you listen to part 1 and part 2 of this series, you'll probably get a real sense of what it was like then. But what happened afterward was quite interesting, because normally it's recommended that you come home and have some time to integrate, spend some time alone and with friends and family, try to minimize stress, perhaps get out in nature a bit, do some yoga, do some meditation, and really process the deep healing that takes place during a plant medicine ceremony or series of ceremonies, as it were. Now, in my case, I came back and I did that last report on the plane, and I had every intention of arriving at my house after I drove back from LAX and be like, okay, guys, I made it home, and then waking up the next day and be like, okay, I'm back in LA. This is what it feels like. But truth be told, what happened was I came back and moved within a few days of this experience. So I think my integration process was somewhat skipped or obscured by the fact that I experienced quite a lot of stress in just moving everything I own in my podcast studio from the cell tower infested apartment I was living in Miracle Mile to my current lovely tree-lined home in Laurel Canyon, where I'm recording from presently. But moving for me is difficult. I don't know, maybe it has something to do with my astrological profile or something, but I do not like big changes like that. And especially after I've just gone through a complete psychic and spiritual upheaval. So while I say it was stressful, I mean, I was happy and everything went well, but moving is a pain in the ass for some of us. I know some friends that do it easily. I'm not one of them. So I was very preoccupied with that. And when I move, it's all the things, you know what I mean? I've got to biohack the new crib. I'm very particular about decorating, paint colors. I change out every light switch typically, and light fixtures and doorknobs. And even though the place I moved into was great and it was, move-in ready, it wasn't move-in ready for me because I have my own steez, you know what I mean? I want to come in here and really make it my own and feel at home and get a good vibe going. And it's also my new podcast studio where I'm sitting right now. So by the time this episode comes out, you may or may not have seen some of my live recordings as I've live streamed from the new location. I've got a really great room here and it's just lovely. There's a backyard and I've set up the ice bath and I have a biohacking man cave meditation cottage thing that I have to come up with a good name for, where I keep all of my devices and my sauna, the biocharger, the amp coil, the Juve light, all the things I always talk about on the podcast. Those are all now in one place so my friends and family can come over and get healing and meditate with me. So, it ended up being great, but it was quite a whirlwind when I got home. So what has this experience really meant to me now? To be honest, I've not really journaled a lot. I've not meditated on it. I've just kind of kept it pushing. I came back, moved, and just went right into recording mode. I just went to the Bulletproof Conference. I recorded 17 interviews there in 3 days. I mean, I'm on the move. But if I really have to break down the net effect of this experience, I think more than anything, it was really kind of a passive yin experience in terms of the spiritual transformation, meaning my relationship to the medicine was not like, okay, I'm going to heal myself. It was more as if I was just allowing the intelligence of the plant to do what it was supposed to do with my soul, my brain, my mind, psyche, my emotions, my past, my traumas. I just let it do its thing. And I think when I came back and got back into the householder's life, as we call it, although, of course, I've been meditating and doing my other spiritual practices, a little Kundalini yoga, some breath work, all the things, but it's like nothing's changed in a sense because I'm just me, but I do have the firsthand experience of entering into those other dimensions and having the veil lifted. The veil that separates me currently sitting here on the microphone in a human body, having a human personality, a human ego, human sensations, needs, wants, desires, the part of me that's animal, not bad animal, just animal. You have an animal body and a spiritual soul. And having had that experience, I sit here now and I know that there is much more going on than meets the eye. And so my faith in God has become much deeper. My faith in myself, the ability to trust myself, knowing that there is more to life than the physicality of it. Having the plant medicines give me access to those other dimensions, as I did, as you heard in the field reports, at least to the best of my ability. In the interviews, I relayed many of my experiences, and of course, in the reports that I did after almost every one of the 4 ceremonies. And, there were those moments where you kind of leave what you think is yourself and disappear into the void and have that communion with God and that sense of oneness and being in union with consciousness. And that's a beautiful place to be. Yet at the same time, real life happens. And so I guess what's happened for me is I've come back and I'm like back in real life, but I still have myself tethered to the experience at Rythmia. And also, I just have such fond memories of everyone there. I mean, literally every single person I met there, whether they worked there or were fellow participants, were just so high vibe. I mean, when I was there, I think I joked like, dude, I don't want to go home. Let's all just make a commune here and just chill. Not realistic, but the people that I was there with were just fantastic. So if any of you are hearing this now, I made some new friends there, especially the friends I was in the car accident with, which was such a trip. You can find pictures of that accident, by the way, on my Instagram if you're curious about it. I don't know. I think I didn't take it as seriously as other people, because I was just in the middle of this blissful week, and people were very concerned on Facebook and Instagram when I posted those pictures because we rolled this car. I mean, it wasn't just like we hit a curb and we flipped upside down and there was blood and, there was a bit of carnage. Everyone was okay. But, I really bonded with some people, and just the organization of the staff and the timing and the scheduling and just the beautiful grounds and the beautiful room. I think I'm just so fortunate to have had my first experience be so comfortable. From what I hear, a lot of my close friends have done a lot of work with plant medicines, and they're like, yeah, dude, the experience you had, just so you know, is not how it usually goes. You had a real cushy Westerner sort of experience there. And I don't know if I could have done it any other way the first time. I mean, I think now if I were to endeavor to take ayahuasca again in a different setting, which I could see happening. I really enjoyed the first 3 nights. As you heard in the reports, night 4, not so much. That was kind of a pisser, but the luck of the draw, I'd say 3 out of 4 really beautiful experiences is pretty good odds. So I'd be willing to gamble again, so to speak. But I would be much less picky about, I think, set and setting in terms of just the luxuriousness and the comfort of it. I mean, it wouldn't be that bad if I didn't have my own giant room and a king-size bed and a kick-ass air conditioner and, great filtered water and organic food. I mean, I was really pampered in the Rythmia experience, as is everyone that goes there. And from what I understand, that's not always the case. So I feel fortunate to have had my first time just being an overwhelmingly positive experience and, leaving me with a taste for it. And I think when my intuition and my guidance, my guides, my guardian angels, my relationship with God, when that indicates to me that it might be time to do some more healing and to go deeper, I would be open to having that experience. And frankly, I would just love to go back to Rythmia. I mean, I could see myself just kind of not even doing the guesswork and just going back there and doing that again a time or two, because just being away from home and away from people and away from stress and all that was just fantastic. I think my experience was also a little unique because I was doing, I was creating content and creating media while I was there. I was sort of half journalist, half participant. And that was a little interesting. I would have enjoyed it. I won't say enjoyed it more, but it would have been a different experience if I didn't have my phone or any of my devices or my computer, no social media, and just like really dive in and, enjoy the experience as just a regular participant. So I was kind of multitasking, and that was interesting. But anyway, to recap and shut this thing down, because God knows how many hours we're into this 2-part series, but overall, an absolutely positive experience. And I know that I've grown. I know that I've been healed. I've had experiences since I've been back that would indicate to me that something has shifted. The ways that I get triggered are different. They've lessened in many ways. And I really just have a much more clear view of what I've experienced in my own life from literally the moment I was born, as you heard in the episode. That's when it all started. And I can see these touch points throughout my life where I was harmed or I harmed myself, and that those in many ways set me up for failure, and that I've received so much grace and so much love and salvation, quite frankly, from my family, friends, loved ones, from God, from my spiritual practices, from my spiritual teachers, from all of the, God. Whenever I get into gratitude, and my heart just fills up, and here I am like recording by myself, sitting in a room. It's such a weird thing to be talking to you when there is no you right at this moment, but I know there will be. If that makes sense. But I just feel so blessed. I just have the most incredible life. And it's had so much contrast. I think that's what's made it so rich, is I've just had so many different kinds of experiences, from the darkest of dark to the lightest of light. And as I close this, I'd like to thank everyone at Rythmia. I'd like to thank Josh Trent for helping me make the decision to go there, a fellow podcaster. I think we're going to be doing each other's shows here shortly. He's got a show called Wellness Force. Shout out to Josh. Great guy. We finally met in person recently. And I'm just so grateful to you, the listener, for joining me on all these conversations with all of the fantastic people that I have the opportunity to sit down and share space with. I still continue to I'm just continually in awe that this is one of the things that I get to do for a living. It's just absolutely incredible. And so it's with a full heart that I end this episode. And thank you so much for joining me.